They say the crowd's roar never leaves you. But what no one tells you is how loud the silence becomes once it's gone. When the last flashbulb fades, when the stadium empties and the echoes of your name dissolve into the concrete, there's a moment of quiet so heavy it feels like gravity itself has turned personal. That S, when you start to hear it, the sound of what the game has taken from you. I've seen men walk off the field with rings on their fingers and fractures in their souls. I've seen the champagne of victory-stained carpeted locker rooms that smelled of blood and disbelief. They smile for the cameras, wave to the fans, and climb into black SUVs that take them somewhere quieter, somewhere the applause can't follow. That's where the real battles begin. Not under the lights, not in the huddle, but in hotel rooms, courtrooms, boardrooms, and the restless corners of their own minds. The NFL has always been a story of collisions, helmet to helmet, man to man, ambition to mortality. But off the field, there's a different kind of impact. It's quieter, more psychological. It's where money collides with identity, where fame fractures family, where the same power that built empires begins to erode the men who built them. Every player has two careers, the one the world watches, and the one no one talks about, the invisible season that starts when the cameras turn away. Some call it retirement. Some call it freedom. Most, if they're honest, call it survival. The myth says the game ends when the clock hits zero. But that's never been true. For many, the game continues long after their last down. It continues in court depositions, in medical bills, in tax audits, in broken marriages, in therapy sessions, and in the hollowed-out feeling of no longer being seen. There's a saying among veterans of the league, the NFL doesn't create who you are, it reveals it. But that's only half the truth. The NFL doesn't just reveal who you are, it monetizes it. It broadcasts it. It commodifies your name, your number, your image, and your very humanity. You stop being a person and start being a projection, a brand, a contract, a headline. Think of the stories you've heard over the years: greatness followed by collapse. The quarterback who lost his fortune faster than he earned it. The receiver whose sponsorships evaporated after one controversial post. The running back who spiraled into addiction when the adrenaline dried up. The coach who outsmarted everyone but himself. Each story different, yet somehow the same, because in the NFL, success is never the opposite of loss. It's just the first stage of it. Money comes fast. Then it changes people faster. The first contract feels like a miracle. The second feels like entitlement. The third feels like survival. And by the fourth, if it ever comes, it feels like a test of who still owns you. Every negotiation, every endorsement, every clause and fine print, all part of the same war for control over identity. Off the field, there are no referees, only power. Agents maneuver behind closed doors. Owners shape perception with press releases. Media figures stir narratives that ripple through social media before a player even has the chance to speak. It's a theater of manipulation, and every word has a price. For players, fame becomes both armor and weapon. It shields them from irrelevance, but also attracts every opportunist within reach. When a rookie signs a multi-million-dollar deal, he doesn't just gain wealth, he inherits a target. Family dynamics shift. Friendships distort. Every handshake becomes a transaction. Every smile, a negotiation. By the time he learns to distinguish loyalty from leverage, it's usually too late. I remember sitting once with a former linebacker, 6'3", shoulders like architecture, eyes like aftermath. He told me he still dreams of the crowd sometimes. He said the sound of 80,000 people cheering used to feel like oxygen, but now it sounds like ghosts. The game didn't leave me, he said quietly. It just changed uniforms. His story isn't unique. The off-field battles of the NFL have claimed more than knees and shoulders. They've claimed marriages, bank accounts, reputations, and peace of mind. Fame that once seemed like a gift turns into a labyrinth. One wrong turn, a tweet, a headline, a leaked story on a career built over a decade can evaporate overnight. But the truth is, it's not just about scandal or mismanagement. It's about the structure itself, the economy of attention. The league thrives on perpetual spectacle. There's no off-season for narrative. When the games stop, the stories must continue. Who got paid? Who held out? Who broke down? Who spoke out? The machine demands new characters to feed it, and when it's done, it quietly replaces them. Still, players aren't the only ones fighting. Owners compete in their own wars over markets, television rights, and political influence. Agents wage silent campaigns for leverage. Reporters battle for access and clicks. Every layer of the NFL ecosystem mirrors the same fundamental struggle: how to turn human drama into a profitable story. And in that relentless cycle, something happens, something subtle but irreversible. The line between who these men are and what they represent begins to blur. Their identities, once defined by performance, become distorted by perception. And perception, in the NFL, is a currency far more valuable than truth. The final season isn't always the one you see on television. Sometimes it begins after the last touchdown, in the quiet of an empty locker room where a man finally realizes the game has moved on without him. Sometimes it begins in a hospital room, staring at an MRI scan. Sometimes in a courtroom, or on a podcast microphone, or in a therapist's office trying to untangle who he's become. The stories we celebrate on Sunday afternoons are only half the truth. The other half unfolds in silence away from the crowd, where players battle the very system they once embodied. This is the side of the NFL no highlight reel can capture. The side where the human cost is measured not in yards gained, but in identities lost. When you strip away the helmets, the contracts, the luxury, and the noise, what remains are men wrestling with the consequences of success. Men who chased immortality and found exposure. Men who learned that the league's greatest game, isn't football, s survival and the empire built around it. So tonight, we begin not on the field, but in the void that follows it. We walk into the silence after the roar, into the space where fame, money, and rivalry become indistinguishable forces pulling, consuming, and reshaping the men who built the modern NFL. This isn't just a story about sports. It's a story about identity, capitalism, and the fragile intersection of power and humanity. It's a story about the cost of being visible in a world that monetizes every second of your existence. And it's about the final season, the one every player faces when the game, in all its glory and brutality, finally stops loving them back. The lights go out, the cameras fade, and all that's left is a man asking the question, who was I when the crowd stopped watching? The NFL has always sold itself as America's grand stage, a weekly epic, where strength, speed, and will converge beneath floodlights. But beneath the spectacle lies a quieter, more calculating world. One that doesn't unfold between the sidelines, but behind contracts, press conferences, and private phone calls. This off-field theater has grown so large, so intertwined with the modern NFL, that it no longer shadows the game, it defines it. Today, the politics of power, money, and fame have become as consequential as any championship. What began as a league of athletes has become a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, shaped as much by negotiation as by performance. The modern NFL isn't just played on grass. It's played in boardrooms, on social media timelines, and within the language of brand management. Every game you watch on Sunday is the final scene in a much longer script, one written by agents, sponsors, owners, and lawyers, long before kickoff. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It began decades ago, when the league shifted from sport to spectacle. In the 1960s, Commissioner Pete Rozelle understood television's potential before anyone else. The NFL-LAFL merger in 1970 and the dawn of Monday Night Football turned football into a national ritual. Stadium attendance mattered less than television ratings. And when ratings rose, so did money. What followed was inevitable. The game became product, and players became assets. Free agency in 1993 was the next seismic moment. It gave players mobility and, with it, leverage. For the first time, the men on the field could negotiate their worth rather than inherit it. It was a revolution masked as reform. Some players saw it as emancipation, others as a new kind of pressure. Because with freedom came exposure, and with exposure came the expectation to be more than an athlete. Every deal carried an image clause. Every clause demanded a persona. The explosion of media rights through the 2000s turned that exposure into oxygen. Networks fought billion-dollar wars for broadcasting deals. The NFL learned that visibility wasn't just valuable, it was infinite. Soon came the age of social media, where the boundaries between game and life dissolved completely. Fans wanted access. The league obliged. Cameras entered locker rooms. Players curated personal brands. Teams released mixed-up segments to humanize their stars, even as those same moments were repackaged as corporate marketing. And just like that, the NFL's true economy revealed itself: attention. Whoever controlled attention controlled power. Today, every headline, every podcast appearance, every endorsement is part of that unseen competition. Contracts are public theater, rivalries are global content, and scandals are commodities. The off-field world, the one built on money, ego, and narrative, has grown so powerful that even victories on the field often feel like sequels to boardroom decisions. Former running back Arian Foster once said, "You stop playing football long before the game stops playing you." He wasn't just talking about injuries. He was describing the machine, the relentless churn that keeps the NFL relevant, profitable, and emotionally devouring. The league's infrastructure depends on perpetual drama. The contract disputes, the social media feuds, the celebrity breakups, the off-season trades that flood talk shows and timelines. Every story extends the brand. Every controversy fuels another news cycle. The NFL doesn't just manage spectacle, it manufactures it. But behind that system are people. Human beings whose lives bend under the weight of the machine. A 22-year-old rookie who signs a deal worth more than his parents could imagine is suddenly responsible for a financial empire built on endorsements, taxes, and family expectations. A veteran who's been cut 3 times must brand himself online to stay visible. A head coach faces as much media pressure over a tweet as over a losing streak. Everyone is playing a second game the off-field one. Then the rules change constantly. The stakes are immense. The average NFL career lasts just over 3 years. 3 years to earn generational wealth, to navigate agents, to protect health, to avoid scandal, to invest wisely, to maintain a reputation that can outlive your prime. 3 years to turn youth into legacy before time and injury begin their hunt. And every move is watched, dissected, and commodified by a billion-dollar network of corporations, media conglomerates, and fans who believe they know the players better than the players know themselves. Meanwhile, ownership power has never been stronger. 32 billionaires control the infrastructure of the league, the stadiums, the media rights, the franchise valuations, and, most importantly, the narrative. They shape the image of the NFL as a symbol of patriotism, unity, and endurance, even when reality cracks that facade. They negotiate new television deals while players fight for healthcare coverage. They speak about loyalty while engineering relocations for tax breaks and stadium subsidies. Agents sit between these worlds, serving as both protectors and profiteers. They broker deals, navigate legal gray zones, and build personal brands of their own. Their success depends not just on negotiation, but on manipulation, understanding how to leak, when to posture, and how to weaponize public opinion. The modern player-agent relationship is one of mutual leverage rather than mutual trust. And then, there's the fame economy. Endorsements, social media influence, brand collaborations, all designed to maximize exposure while minimizing individuality. The player who wants to find himself by performance must now define himself by relevance. Relevance sells jerseys. Relevance attracts clicks. Relevance maintains career momentum long after the body begins to fail. But relevance is also a debt. The moment a player stops trending, his perceived value declines. Fame doesn't just elevate, it isolates. Every private moment risks public scrutiny. Every friendship invites speculation. Every political stance divides audiences. Some players learn to weaponize that attention. Others retreat from it, creating a distance that the media interprets as arrogance or instability. The same system that builds icons has no hesitation dismantling them. And within that cycle lies the truest reflection of the modern NFL, a collision between commerce and conscience. Off the field, the game becomes a study of contradictions, wealth and loneliness, admiration and paranoia, success and disposability. We'll explore those contradictions across this documentary, each batch peeling back another layer of the unseen. We'll look at the structure of power and the moral cost of success. We'll trace how contracts define not just value, but identity. How agents wield loyalty as a bargaining chip. How endorsements reshape integrity. How social media blurs truth into performance. How gambling and legal controversies threaten the league's credibility. How activism tests its moral boundaries. And how players grapple with life after the roar. In 2018, Richard Sherman, acting as his own agent, negotiated a self-represented contract with the San Francisco 49ers. The deal sparked debate across sports media. Was he empowering himself or undercutting years of established norms? His answer was simple. No one will fight harder for you than you. It was a statement of defiance, but also of necessity. In a league where image and loyalty are currencies, autonomy itself becomes a form of rebellion. Yet autonomy is rare. For every player like Sherman, hundreds are consumed by the machinery. Rookie symposiums teach financial literacy, but they can't prepare players for the weight of expectation. Union reps negotiate for benefits, but even they struggle against billion-dollar corporate interests. Journalists expose corruption, yet often rely on the same access the system controls. It's a web of dependency where everyone benefits and everyone loses something. As we navigate through this episode, we'll see that the off-field battles of the NFL mirror America itself. Ambition without balance. Freedom measured in contracts. Morality shaped by market forces. The league is both a symbol and a warning, reflection of how success can turn personal when the line between sport and spectacle disappears. The purpose of this story isn't condemnation, it's clarity. To understand how this modern empire sustains itself. To show that the game doesn't end with the final whistle, simply changes shape. For decades, fans have asked why players risk their health, reputation, and privacy for a system that so often betrays them. The truth is complicated, because for all its contradictions, the NFL remains the most captivating narrative machine in American culture. It feeds our hunger for drama, redemption, and spectacle. And as long as the public watches, the system endures. This documentary will take you through the undercurrents of that endurance. We'll see the personal, legal, and emotional collisions that happen once the helmets come off. We'll meet men who were kings on Sunday and question marks on Monday. We'll examine how the league sustains its mythology while managing the fallout of its own success. The story of the NFL has always been told through its heroes. But the truth of the NFL lives in its aftermath, the contracts, the lawsuits, the lost endorsements, the fractured friendships, and the quiet reckonings that follow fame. To understand the league, we have to step off the field and into the world that sustains it. Because in today's NFL, the real scoreboard isn't measured in points. It's measured in influence, in wealth, in survival. And every man in the system, from rookies to executives, is playing for something far greater than victory. They're playing for control of their own story. The first thing every rookie learns isn't in the playbook. It's in the contract. The moment a player signs, he steps into a system designed to measure his worth not by heart or sacrifice, but by leverage. It's the invisible line between loyalty and business, between belonging to a team and belonging to it. Every signature is a transaction of trust and control. And in the NFL, control has always had an owner. The modern contract war is a chess match cloaked in smiles. Salary caps, franchise tags, guaranteed money. They sound like technicalities, but they're battlefields in disguise. Behind every deal is a tug of war between those who risk their bodies and those who write the checks. And the tension is older than the Super Bowl itself. In the 1970s, players had no free agency, no leverage. Teams owned the rights to their careers even after contracts expired. A man could dedicate a decade to one franchise, then be told he was finished, and he had no recourse. That all began to change when players like John Mackey and Reggie White challenged the system in court, forcing the league to confront its own contradictions. They didn't just fight for money, fought for autonomy, for the right to define the worth of their own labor. When free agency finally came in 1993, it was heralded as liberation. Players could now move, negotiate, and bargain like professionals in any other field. But freedom came with fine print. The salary cap arrived in the same breath, a mechanism designed to keep parity, but also to keep the power structure intact. Suddenly, a player's value wasn't just about talent, it was about math, cap space, age curves, contract length. The language of humanity was replaced by the arithmetic of business. There's a story old-timers tell about Emmitt Smith's 1993 holdout. The Cowboys had just won the Super Bowl. Smith wanted to be paid like the best running back in football because he was. Jerry Jones refused. The team started the season 0-2 without him. 2 weeks later, the deal was done, and the Cowboys went on to repeat as champions. That season wasn't just about wins. It was about the unspoken acknowledgement that even in America's most powerful league, labor still matters. But the balance never stays steady. For every Smith who won his standoff, there's a Le'Veon Bell, a player who sat out an entire season to protect his value, only to find the market had moved on without him. The franchise tag, created as a tool to retain stars, became a weapon of restraint. Teams could lock players in year by year, draining their prime while avoiding long-term guarantees. It's a business tactic disguised as loyalty. A player might sign for tens of millions, but only a fraction is truly guaranteed. In a sport where the average career lasts less than 4 years, that distinction is everything. The difference between security and illusion. Behind every press conference where a smiling athlete says "I'm blessed," there's a family reading the fine print. Calculating risk. One torn ligament, one concussion, one anonymous transaction later, and that blessing can vanish. It's in this crucible that true resentment brews. Players begin to realize that while they are the product, they are never the proprietor. A quarterback like Patrick Mahomes signs a $500 million deal, and headlines scream unprecedented wealth. But the small print reveals that much of it is conditional based on performance. Longevity, team health, market stability. Even the biggest contract is still permission, not ownership. The public rarely sees the machinery behind it all. The agents negotiating until dawn. The lawyers parsing injury clauses. The general managers leveraging fan sentiment to corner a player's reputation. Leaks become weapons. He's selfish. He's not a team player. These are coded phrases in the league. SPR war, designed to make men look ungrateful for wanting what they've earned. The more a player asserts his value, the more he's portrayed as a villain. And yet, in the shadows, some players are learning to outplay the system. Kirk Cousins mastered the art of the short-term, fully guaranteed contract, turning risk into leverage. Lamar Jackson represented himself, betting on his own worth without a traditional agent. These men didn't just sign deals, they shifted paradigms. They reminded the league that control isn't permanent, it's negotiated, year by year, word by word. Still, the cost of rebellion is high. For every player who reclaims autonomy, another fades into the quiet aftershock of lost opportunity. The league doesn't forgive easily. Reputation lingers longer than injury. One wrong negotiation, one public dispute, and a man can find himself toxic, a label that erases years of excellence. Behind all of this is a question that never leaves the locker room. Who really owns the game? The players, the owners, the fans who fund it all, or the billion-dollar broadcast deals that now dictate kickoff times and destinies alike? A contract in the NFL is not just paper. It's a power document, one that reveals the architecture of control. Owners leverage legacy, players leverage mortality. And in between them, agents and lawyers translate human value into numbers that make sense to spreadsheets but not to hearts. I've sat with men who signed deals that looked like triumphs but felt like chains. One told me, "I thought I made it. Then I realized the money didn't mean I owned my time." Another confessed, "You're not just fighting for respect, you're fighting for your future, and everyone's watching you lose." These are not sob stories. They read the anatomy of a machine that turns human ambition into corporate yield. The NFL's economic engine thrives because it convinces players that they are lucky to be there, even as it profits from every second they're on borrowed time. And yet, despite all of it, players keep walking back into that room, signing those papers, chasing that dream. Because no matter how calculated the system becomes, the human need to prove, to win, to matter, it's stronger than cynicism. Every contract signed is a gamble against fate. A bet that this time, the body will hold, the dream will last, and the number will finally reflect the truth. But deep down, everyone in the game knows it never truly does. Contracts don't define equality, they define negotiation. And in the NFL, negotiation is just another word for survival. Every player believes they LLB the exception, that they LLB the one who can trust everyone in the room. But in the NFL, trust is the most fragile currency of all. Behind every million-dollar deal, behind every public promise of loyalty, there's an agent somewhere, a middleman balancing ambition, politics, and survival in a marketplace that trades human futures. Agents are the silent architects of careers. They negotiate contracts, broker endorsements, navigate egos, and spin stories for the media when silence isn't enough. But what most outsiders, Dan, TC, is that the business of representation has evolved into an empire, one where loyalty often bends to the highest bidder. In the early days of the league, an agent's role was modest: a handshake, a lawyer's letterhead, a middle-class fee. Players didn't know what leverage looked like. They were grateful for whatever they could get. But as television turned the NFL into a global product, as endorsement deals climbed into the millions, the power of agents grew in lockstep. By the 1990s, agencies weren't just representing athletes, they were building dynasties. Firms like CAA, Athletes First, and Rosenhaus Sports became brands unto themselves. They didn't just negotiate. They controlled pipelines of talent, media narratives, and political alliances within teams. The line between advocacy and manipulation blurred. Every draft season now brings a quiet war. Agents fly across the country, promising rookies the world, financial security, brand deals, family care, mentorship. But in reality, every new client is an investment portfolio. Players become assets in a vast internal market, traded between agencies, poached from competitors, reshuffled based on performance metrics and projected value. The modern agent must sell loyalty while operating in an economy that rewards betrayal. That contradiction defines the entire relationship. An agent's income depends on their player's success, but their sustainability depends on the next big signing. Today, it's not uncommon for a young athlete to switch representation 3 or 4 times before his second contract. Each change leaves emotional residue. Promises broken, trust eroded, friendships weaponized. There, as an unspoken saying in locker rooms, your agent works for you until someone else offers him more of you. It's cynical, but earned. And yet, In this morally gray market, some agents become lifelines. Men like Lee Steinberg, who fought for player rights, guaranteed money, and long-term healthcare before it was fashionable, reshaped the industry. He saw athletes as brands, yes, but also as humans with post-football futures. His model inspired a generation, including a young Drew Rosenhaus, who took the opposite approach, unapologetically aggressive, media-savvy, and confrontational. Rosenhaus turned the negotiation table into a stage. He understood something fundamental about the new NFL, that public pressure could move ownership faster than private logic. Every televised interview, every leaked offer, every soundbite was part of the show. He made the agent visible, a protagonist in the player's story. It worked for a while, but it also shifted the culture. Suddenly, representation wasn't about mentorship, it was about performance. Agents became celebrities in their own right, cultivating social media followings, using access as leverage. Players began to wonder who the real star was, the athlete or the man talking about him. And in the middle of it all, conflict of interest quietly metastasized. Agencies began representing coaches, executives, even media figures, people who theoretically stood on opposite sides of negotiations. One company could have a head coach, a quarterback, and a reporter all on the same payroll. Objectivity dissolved into influence. The same agent who brokered a contract might also control the story about it. In 2018, a player told a journalist off the record, "My agent got me a deal. But I realized he was closer to the GM than he was to me." That sentence captured an entire generation's disillusionment. Representation had become a business of proximity, not principle. Money magnified everything. Top agents now make millions per year in commissions alone, while lower-tier players, the ones barely holding on to practice squad spots, can't even get a return call. The hierarchy mirrors the league itself. A few megastars at the top, and a vast ecosystem of forgotten men beneath. When free agency opens, the phones ring endlessly. Deals are made in hotel lobbies, on golf courses, in text threads between lawyers and team presidents. But what rarely makes the headlines are the quiet manipulations. An agent favoring one client over another, steering opportunities toward players that serve their own career strategy. Representation, at its worst, becomes a game of selective advocacy. Some voices amplified, others muted. For many athletes, the most important decision they'll ever make, SNT what team they play for, S who they trust to speak for them. Choose right, and your career is a guided ascent. Choose wrong, and you might never recover. The wrong agent can bury you in bad deals, mishandle taxes, misread the market, or leak information that poisons your reputation before you ever step on the field. And then there's the pressure of family. Every year, players, parents, cousins, and childhood friends try to become de facto managers, financial advisors, consultants. It's human. Everyone wants to help, to belong to the success. But the NFL economy has no mercy for sentiment. Family and business rarely coexist peacefully. More than a few players have lost fortunes not because of bad play, but because of misplaced trust. Even the NFLPA, the union meant to protect players, walks a fine line. It certifies agents and sets commission limits, but enforcement is light. There's a reason why scandals keep resurfacing, from misused signing bonuses to agents skimming off endorsement deals. The players are often too loyal, too distracted, or too afraid to confront it until it's too late. And yet, this isn't a story of villains. It's a story of incentives. Everyone in this ecosystem is playing to survive. Agents are judged by their client list. Players are judged by their contracts. Teams are judged by how little they can spend to win big. The entire system is wired to breed opportunism. But somewhere in the middle of all that noise, there are genuine connections. Players who credit their agents with saving their careers, keeping them grounded, steering them through crises, not as businessmen, but as mentors. For every betrayal, there's a bond that endures beyond the field. It's a paradox. the same system that exploits loyalty also depends on it. The deeper truth is that the modern NFL is not just a game between players and teams. It's a network of relationships, power brokers, and intermediaries. Everyone wants a piece of the action. And the player, the man who bleeds and breaks for the spectacle, is often the last one to realize how many hands are reaching for his future. Because the NFL isn't built on equality, it's built on leverage. And in the marketplace of loyalties, leverage is the only kind of faith that counts. Fame in the NFL doesn't arrive like a sunrise, it hits like lightning. Sudden, blinding, electrifying. One game, one highlight, one viral moment can transform a man from a name on a roster into a symbol. And in that instant, the game stops being just football. It becomes business. It becomes brand. The NFL's transformation into a fame economy wasn't accidental. It was engineered. In the 1980s, television and sponsorships collided, and athletes became walking billboards. The league discovered something powerful. Charisma could sell as much as talent. A player's smile could be worth more than his stats. Image became its own form of currency. Nike saw it first, then Gatorade, Reebok, Under Armour. Suddenly, the locker room wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a marketplace. A player's face, his voice, even his mannerisms became assets to be monetized. And with every deal came a trade-off: authenticity for access, privacy for profit. Endorsements once felt like rewards, now they're expectations. The modern athlete is no longer just measured by touchdowns or tackles, but by engagement. Followers, clicks, retweets, every post becomes part of the brand. A good Sunday performance can spike online sales. A bad tweet can cost millions. The field and the feed have merged into one unrelenting arena. Consider Odell Beckham Jr., a name that became bigger than his position. His one-handed catch in 2014 wasn't just a highlight. It was a launchpad. Within months, he was the face of Nike football, appearing in commercials, music videos, and fashion campaigns. But with every headline came expectation. The more famous he became, the less forgiving the spotlight grew. Every celebration, every misstep, every haircut became a debate about ego and professionalism. Beckham didn't just play football, he performed Odell Beckham Jr., a role written by the public. That's the paradox of branding. The more visible you are, the more invisible your real self becomes. The athlete's personality is curated, trimmed, and reframed for mass consumption. PR advisors rewrite interviews. Marketing teams control access. Agents manage partnerships like stock portfolios. Everything becomes strategic. But fame is fickle. It doesn't love anyone for long. Ask Johnny Manziel, the college superstar whose name became a global brand before he ever played a full NFL season. Endorsements poured in. He was Money Manziel, the young rebel face of a corporate machine that wanted to sell rebellion. When his career collapsed, the sponsors vanished faster than the fans. The brand had consumed the man, and when there was nothing left to sell, the system moved on. Even the greats aren't immune. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Patrick Mahomes, each mastered the art of branding in different ways. Brady became a lifestyle symbol: clean eating, discipline, longevity. Manning became humor and relatability, a public image so carefully managed that even his self-deprecation was strategic. Mahomes became modernity incarnate: youth, tech, accessibility. But behind every campaign is a silent truth. The more successful the brand, the more pressure to maintain the illusion. Endorsements change incentives. They reward safety, not honesty. Sponsors don't want controversy. They want consistency. That means players learn early what not to say. Politics, religion, social issues off limits. Authenticity becomes risky. The same system that preaches individuality quietly enforces conformity. In 2016, Colin Kaepernick discovered that firsthand. His decision to kneel during the national anthem was an TA branding move. It was a moral one. but it collided with the fame economy in catastrophic fashion. Sponsors panicked, networks debated. The NFL distanced itself. His career was swallowed by the same visibility that once made him marketable. Ironically, years later, Nike reversed course, turning Kaepernick into a global campaign about courage and sacrifice. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. It was powerful, it was emotional, but it also proved the system's elasticity. Even rebellion can be commodified when the timing is right. That's how the fame economy works. It doesn't care about truth, it cares about story. The story sells, morality becomes flexible. Players know this. That's why image management has become an industry within the industry. Teams now hire media coaches to train rookies in soundbites and posture. Every rookie symposium includes sessions on building your personal brand. What began as advice has turned into indoctrination. Before a player even takes a professional snap, he's being taught how to market himself, how to smile in interviews, how to avoid controversial language, how to become palatable to sponsors. The pressure can be suffocating. A single misinterpreted quote can spark outrage. A party photo can become tabloid fodder. A moment of honesty can be reframed as arrogance. The fame economy feeds on volume. Every scandal, every tweet, every clip fuels engagement, and engagement in this ecosystem is money. But the human toll is harder to measure. Fame isolates. Players become commodities even in their private lives. Their homes are invaded by cameras, their relationships dissected online. The more they earn, the less they own of themselves. Michael Vick once said after his comeback, "The hardest thing was on football. It was becoming human again after being treated like a headline." That sentence captures the existential cost of fame. The athlete stops being a man and becomes a narrative, a projection of what fans need him to be. Even retirement doesn't free them. Brands follow players into their post-career years, shaping legacies as much as highlight reels. Think of the State Farm homes, Papa John's, Manning, Subway Watt. These are more than commercials. They are cultural myths that redefine how we remember players. The businessman replaces the gladiator. But the fame economy isn't all predatory. It's also a source of empowerment when handled with precision. LeBron James, though outside the NFL, changed the paradigm for athletes across sports. He proved that, with control, brand power can translate into ownership, production, philanthropy. NFL stars like Russell Wilson and Travis Kelce are following suit, using visibility not just for income, but for influence. For once, the narrative is being courted. Still, most players never reach that level of autonomy. For every icon with a brand empire, there are hundreds who get a brief taste of the spotlight and then disappear when the algorithm stops favoring them. Their endorsements dry up, their relevance fades, and the phone stops ringing. The fame economy has no retirement plan. In the end, branding is both lifeline and trap. It can elevate a player beyond the field, but it can also chain him to an image he no longer recognizes. The more successful the persona, the harder it becomes to escape it. A man who built his fortune on being invincible is rarely allowed to be vulnerable. Fame in this league isn't something you own. It's something rented from the public, from corporations, from the culture. And when the lease expires, you realize that the only thing more costly than being famous is being forgotten. The field is only half the story. The other half is told under fluorescent lights, through microphones, in headlines, tweets, and leaks. In today's NFL, the scoreboard doesn't stop at the 50-yard line. It continues across press conferences, social media feeds, and talk show debates. Every soundbite, every rumor, every post has currency. And like all forms of currency, it can be traded, weaponized, or stolen. Players used to fear broken bones. Now they fear broken narratives. The modern NFL athlete lives in a perpetual state of performance, not just for coaches and fans, but for the invisible audiences shaping how they are perceived. A fumbled word can overshadow a decade of discipline. A private text can become a national headline by morning. Somewhere between ESPN's breaking banner and the Twitter echo chamber. Truth and context start to fracture, and reputation becomes the new line of scrimmage. Public relations teams now occupy the same importance once reserved for trainers or play callers. The first call after a controversial play isn't to an agent or a spouse. It's to the PR rep. What's our angle, they ask. What's the statement? That's not paranoia, it's survival. Because in the post-2000 NFL, stories move faster than facts. Consider the case of Terrell Owens, whose saga with the Eagles in 2005 turned from a locker room dispute into a weeks-long media circus. Cameras waited outside his driveway as if covering a political scandal. Each soundbite, each shrug became part of a national referendum on attitude. Owens wasn't just playing football. He was performing a version of himself written by the press. That tension between the man and the manufactured myth still defines the NFL's media landscape today. For every player who controls his story, another loses it entirely. Anonymous leaks can end a season. A whispered character concern before the draft can cost millions. The power of information, who owns it, who spins it, who profits from it, has become one of the league's most ruthless games. The sports journalist used to be a chronicler. Now, many are influencers, gatekeepers, or even adversaries. Social media has made everyone a publisher and players, tired of being defined by others, learned to become their own networks. LeBron James built the decision. Tom Brady launched Man in the Arena. Patrick Mahomes' brand is curated through direct content, bypassing traditional media altogether. But the paradox is this. The more a player controls his own image, the more the machine hungers to reclaim it. Leaks are the NFL's currency of chaos. Front offices use them to float rumors, test public reactions, or quietly assassinate a player's market value. A source close to the team might not exist, or might be the general manager himself, calling a journalist to shape perception before a contract negotiation. In that invisible space between truth and manipulation, careers are reshaped without a single down being played. The league thrives on narrative control because narrative sustains the business. The Super Bowl is not just a game, it's a story arc, complete with heroes, villains, and redemption arcs written for prime time. Yet for every story the NFL crafts, there's one it suppresses. Colin Kaepernick's kneel was more than a protest, it was a narrative rupture. What followed was not just controversy, but a demonstration of the league's immense power to rewrite history in real time. Sponsors pulled back, broadcasters shifted framing. The story became about disruption, not about principle. By the time Kaepernick was effectively exiled, the narrative machine had done its job. But control cuts both ways. When Antonio Brown took to Instagram to release private conversations and footage of team moments, he weaponized transparency itself. His meltdown was public, chaotic, but also revealing a portrait of an athlete unfiltered, stripped of the corporate polish. It wasn't good PR, but it was raw truth. The audience couldn't look away. Behind every headline is a calculus. Who benefits from the leak? Who's trying to steer the story? When a player's sources speak out, it's often a deliberate maneuver to build leverage, apply pressure, or stir public sympathy. This is the new chessboard of the NFL. Power disguised as narrative. The players who master this game become brands that outlive their careers. Think of Tom Brady's reinvention from system quarterback to methodical legend, aided by documentaries, social media strategy, and selective interviews. His control of tone and timing is surgical. Contrast that with the players who stumble into media traps, words taken out of context, stories spun into caricature. The difference isn't always morality or intelligence, it's control. And yet, total control is an illusion. Even the most disciplined athlete is one viral clip away from public crucifixion. That tension breeds paranoia inside locker rooms. Every word becomes a risk. Every private moment, a potential story. What once stayed within the walls of a team can now detonate across millions of screens in seconds. Journalists, too, walk a tightrope. The demand for immediacy pressures even ethical reporters into publishing half-verified leads. Clicks are the new bylines. The result? Players and media trapped in a codependent spiral, needing each other, distrusting each other, feeding each other. But here's the irony. For all the noise, the game remains silent on what really matters: mental health, family tolls, the psychological aftermath of being constantly watched, judged, and edited. Players retire not just from the game, but from the exhaustion of being public property. One former Pro Bowl player put it plainly: "I was addicted to fame. I was addicted to proving the story about me was wrong." That's the hidden economy of modern football: reputation as a form of currency that never stops trading. Every athlete faces the moment when his name stops trending. That's when you learn whether the media built your legacy or borrowed it, whether your image was an asset or a mask. And when the lights fade, the silence that follows isn't peace, it's withdrawal. This is the unseen battlefield of the NFL, where stories are written not by scoreboards, but by the unseen editors of perception. The war for narrative isn't fought with helmets or pads. It's fought with whispers, screenshots, and spin. And when you ask, who owns the story? The honest answer is whoever tells it first. The new battleground isn't on grass or turf, it's digital. It refreshes every second, lives inside a pocket, and holds more power over careers than a coach, a GM, or even the scoreboard. In this age of hyperconnectivity, the NFL's players don't just perform on Sundays. They perform every day, for millions of invisible spectators scrolling through an endless feed of judgment. Once, an athlete's image was filtered through journalists, networks, and publicists. Now, it's a raw, direct feed. The same phone that captures a highlight can destroy a reputation. The same tweet that inspires millions can alienate sponsors. In the NFL's modern ecosystem, fame has no off switch, and neither does consequence. A player posts a thought, a lyric, a joke, or a moment of frustration, and in seconds, it becomes evidence. Screenshots replace memory. Outrage replaces dialogue. The old saying, "Let the tape speak for itself," has evolved. The tape is now social media, and it speaks louder, faster, and often without mercy. The shift began quietly. When Chad Ochocinco Johnson live tweeted from practice in the late 2000s, it was seen as charming rebellion. Today, the same act would trigger a league fine and a public debate about professionalism. Social media blurred the line between authenticity and risk, between personality and liability. Every post now passes through the silent filter of potential fallout. The economics of outrage made this inevitable. The platforms thrive on reaction, not reflection. Anger is engagement. Controversy is currency. A player's misstep, real or perceived, generates traffic, headlines, and ad revenue, and often at the expense of truth or proportion. Consider the 2019 Antonio Brown saga. What began as a dispute with the Raiders quickly became a viral spectacle. Each Instagram Live, each tweet, each cryptic message feeding a cycle of fascination and disgust. Within weeks, Brown's public unraveling became a serialized drama, watched in real time by millions. The media no longer needed to report it. The player himself had become the story's engine. Social media offered athletes the promise of autonomy, the ability to bypass gatekeepers and own their narrative. But that ownership is double-edged. It comes with a constant need to manage perception. Every photo must be intentional. Every caption a calculation. What used to be a publicist's job is now a full-time personal performance. For young players entering the league, that pressure is suffocating. College recruits are told to scrub their online history before draft day. A tweet from high school can cost a multi-million-dollar signing bonus. Teams now hire digital investigators to monitor players' social media activity, scanning for political opinions, language, or associations that could draw backlash. It's not just about avoiding scandal, it's about avoiding potential volatility. Cancel culture, in this sense, isn't a cultural debate, it's a business reality. Sponsors don't care about nuance, they care about liability. When a player's name trends for the wrong reason, the corporate response is immediate. Endorsements are paused, partnerships reassessed, statements drafted overnight. By the time the truth surfaces, the damage is often irreversible. In 2020, when Drew Brees' comments about standing for the national anthem reignited a national firestorm. His apology arrived hours later, but the internet had already delivered its verdict. His entire legacy, built over 2 decades, was reframed in a single day. That's the velocity of reputation warfare. Instant, unforgiving, algorithmically amplified. The NFL itself has learned to weaponize this environment. Leaks are coordinated through digital surrogates. Storylines are tested on social media before being framed by mainstream outlets. Even disciplinary actions, suspensions, fines. Investigations are often announced via leaks to trusted insiders on Twitter, turning justice into theater. Players, too, have adapted. Many now build their own digital teams, content managers, crisis consultants, social strategists to maintain constant engagement. Some use it to humanize themselves, to show fatherhood, faith, or humor. Others use it as leverage, broadcasting discontent when private negotiations fail. Deleting your team from your bio has become a modern contract signal, a small act of digital rebellion read by millions. But reputation warfare cuts deeper than brand management. It touches the soul of identity. When a player becomes a trending topic, he ceases to be a person and becomes a symbol of race, wealth, morality, politics, or failure. The public no longer sees nuance. They see archetypes. The diva wide receiver, the spoiled millionaire, the ungrateful protester. In a system built on instant categorization, individuality dies a quiet death. What makes this war so insidious is that it never ends. A mistake made at 23 can follow a player into retirement. Search engines don't forget. Old posts resurface during contract years. Character is now a digital footprint, and redemption takes longer to trend than condemnation. Some players resist the current altogether. Marshawn Lynch famously refused to engage. "I'm just here so I won, get fined" became a cultural statement, a protest against the performative demands of fame. His silence became its own brand, proof that even abstaining can be a strategy in a world addicted to exposure. Others embrace the chaos. Juju Smith-Schuster built his early reputation on TikTok dances and fan engagement, merging playfulness with marketability. But when his team lost, those same traits were reframed as distractions. The same fans who celebrated his energy turned it into a weapon of ridicule. That sets the trap of digital identity. The audience builds you until it's ready to break you. The sociological implications go beyond football. In a broader sense, players are mirrors of the culture that consumes them. The internet demands authenticity, but punishes imperfection. It preaches empowerment while rewarding humiliation. And in that contradiction, every athlete becomes a target, both adored and disposable. The emotional toll is rarely discussed. Mental health professionals working with athletes describe the constant anxiety of living under surveillance. The compulsion to check notifications, the dread of waking up to a new controversy. For players already managing physical injuries and public pressure, the digital strain can be crushing. "You don't get to turn off," one veteran said. "Even in bed, your name can blow up for something you didn't say yet." There's also resilience in this new world. Players have used social platforms to raise funds, challenge injustice, and tell stories that traditional media ignored. When Damar Hamlin collapsed on the field in 2023, social media became a lifeline of empathy. Millions of fans donating to his charity, players uniting across teams. It proved that the same platforms capable of destroying reputations can also elevate humanity. The war for reputation will never vanish. It evolves, morphs, redefines itself with each technological wave. Tomorrow, it might be artificial intelligence recreating voices or deepfakes spreading faster than facts. But the core question remains unchanged. In a world where perception is power, who controls your story when everyone else can tell it for you? The NFL's digital coliseum rewards the loud, punishes the careless, and consumes the vulnerable. Players once battled for yards. Now they battle for truth. It always begins quietly, whispers in locker rooms, text messages from friends, tips exchanged between insiders who know the rhythms of the game better than any bookmaker. For decades, the NFL treated gambling as the ultimate taboo, the one sin that could topple the foundation of public trust. But the modern landscape tells a different story. Betting is no longer hidden in smoky back rooms or whispered through offshore hotlines. It's on every phone, every commercial break, every stadium banner. The league that once banned association with gamblers now profits from official betting partners. That contradiction lies at the heart of the NFL's integrity crisis, a moral paradox born from the collision of commerce and competition. The game sells unpredictability as entertainment, yet depends on trust as its currency. When money flows freely into both sides of that equation, the line between legitimate spectacle and manipulated outcome becomes perilously thin. For much of the 20th century, the NFL's stance on gambling was absolute. In 1963, Commissioner Pete Rozelle suspended two Hall of Fame players, Paul Hornung of the Green Bay Packers and Alex Karras of the Detroit Lions, for betting on NFL games. The punishment was meant to be a public crucifixion, a statement that no man, however talented, was above the game's integrity. Rozelle declared, "The slightest suspicion of gambling can destroy the public's confidence." Those words would echo through decades of league policy. But that was a different America. Gambling lived in the shadows, policed by moralists and state laws. Then came the digital revolution, and with it, the democratization of vice. What once required a bookie now takes a swipe on an app. In 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, opening the floodgates for legalized sports betting across the country. In less than 5 years, more than 30 states would adopt some form of legal wagering. The NFL, ever a master of adaptation, pivoted from moral opposition to monetized partnership. Official sportsbooks signed multi-million-dollar sponsorship deals. Broadcasters integrated live betting odds into their coverage. Stadiums installed betting lounges. A league framed it as fan engagement, a way to bring supporters closer to the action. But behind the marketing language, something darker stirred. The same players once warned never to associate with gamblers now found themselves surrounded by their influence. Friends, family, and followers, all one text message away from temptation. A teammate's injury, a coach's game plan, a hint about a player's availability, all could move betting lines by millions. The potential for exploitation was no longer theoretical. It was embedded in the infrastructure. In 2022, the league suspended Atlanta Falcons star Calvin Ridley for placing bets on NFL games while away from the team. His total wagers amounted to just $1,500. Yet the punishment was severe. A full season lost. The NFL's statement was clear. There is nothing more fundamental to the league, success, than the integrity of the game. The irony was impossible to ignore. Ridley had been suspended for doing what the league's own partners were encouraging millions of fans to do every Sunday. The Ridley case wasn't isolated. Since 2021, more than a dozen players have been investigated or suspended for gambling-related violations. Some wagered on other sports from team facilities, unaware that even proximity violated league rules. Others bet through third parties, thinking anonymity could shield them. But in an era of digital surveillance and data sharing, nothing stays hidden for long. The consequences aren't limited to suspensions. Even the perception of impropriety corrodes the fragile trust between fans and the sport. When a player drops a pass, misses a tackle, or fumbles at a critical moment, the question lingers. Was it a mistake or something more? Suspicion itself is the contagion. It spreads faster than truth, eroding the emotional compact that makes professional sports possible. Behind closed doors, league executives know this risk. They studied the cautionary tales from the 1919 Black Sox scan in baseball to the NBA's 2007 referee betting crisis involving Tim Donaghy. Each case followed a pattern: small compromises, rationalized decisions, and finally, exposure that shattered credibility. The NFL, with its billion-dollar broadcast contracts and cultural dominance, understands it cannot afford even a whisper of that collapse. Yet, the league's marriage with gambling continues to deepen. Sportsbooks now sponsor pre-game shows. Betting odds are displayed alongside fantasy stats. The language of the game itself has changed. Fans no longer just ask who won, but whether they covered the spread. In bars, offices, and living rooms, the conversation has become transactional. Allegiance to a team now shares space with allegiance to a wager. That cultural shift changes the psychology of fandom. The more people gamble on outcomes, the more every call, flag, or decision feels personal. Referees are accused of bias, not by rival fans, but by bettors who lost money. The passion that once united communities now fuels outrage algorithms. Every missed field goal becomes a conspiracy. Every officiating error, a suspected fix. For players, this scrutiny is suffocating. Social media amplifies every mistake, fueled by bettors seeking someone to blame. Athletes receive direct messages with threats, slurs, and accusations. "I cost somebody their parlay," one player admitted, after his inbox filled with abuse following a late-game turnover. The sport's emotional toll now includes a silent war with invisible gamblers, who see players not as humans, but as variables in their personal economies. Behind the public spectacle lies another layer: the shadow economy. Illegal betting operations still thrive, exploiting access to insider data. The FBI and Department of Justice continue to monitor criminal infiltration attempts from bribery to point-shaving schemes. Technology has made corruption both easier to conceal and harder to trace. Anonymous cryptocurrency transactions, encrypted group chats, and offshore accounts make enforcement a cat-and-mouse game. What makes today's integrity crisis particularly haunting is that the league itself stands to lose from both sides. Its partnerships with sportsbooks generate revenue and engagement. But every new scandal risks undermining the product that sustains those profits. The more the NFL promotes betting, the more it invites doubt. And doubt is the enemy of sport. Commissioner Roger Goodell has walked that tightrope with polished language, emphasizing responsible gambling and transparency. The league now employs dedicated integrity officers, data monitoring firms, and partnerships with gambling watchdogs. But oversight cannot rewrite human nature. Money will always find the cracks in morality. There's a deeper, quieter story inside this crisis, one about the players themselves. Many come from backgrounds where money was scarce and trust was fragile. For them, the sudden access to wealth, attention, and influence can distort judgment. Gambling offers a sense of control in a world of uncertainty, but it can also become addiction. Former players have spoken about losing entire fortunes chasing odds they believed they could outthink. The line between confidence and compulsion blurs fast when the stakes are both financial and psychological. In the end, the NFL's relationship with gambling is a mirror of America's broader contradictions, moral restraint colliding with capitalist appetite. The league cannot resist the revenue, the engagement, the promise of endless growth. But in doing so, it courts a crisis that could one day threaten the legitimacy of every touchdown, every call, every championship. Integrity, once the league's moral cornerstone, has become a marketing term. And beneath the roar of the crowd lies a question that won't fade. Can a game survive when the business of betting on it becomes bigger than the belief in it? There is a moment, always, when the noise of fame collapses into silence, when the bright lights of the stadium are replaced by the fluorescent hum of a courtroom. It is here, in this sterile space, that the mythology of the NFL meets the machinery of the law. Cameras aren't allowed, but the spectacle never stops. Because in America, no courtroom is truly closed when the defendant wears an NFL jersey. For decades, the league has operated in uneasy coexistence with the justice system, a parallel institution built on power, hierarchy, and the management of narrative. When a player is arrested, charged, or sued, the story becomes something larger than guilt or innocence. It becomes a referendum on the sport itself, on its values, its hypocrisies, its reach. Every era of football has its courtroom ghosts. In the 1980s, Lawrence Taylor's brilliance on the field was shadowed by repeated legal trouble off it. Drugs, violence, and arrests that turned a generational athlete into a public cautionary tale. In the 1990s, Ray Caruth's case, a young wide receiver convicted of conspiracy to commit murder, shattered the league's illusion of control. And in the 2000s, Michael Vick's dogfighting scandal drew a national moral outcry that tested the boundaries of redemption and punishment in the modern sports era. The cases differ, but the anatomy of scandal rarely does. It begins with a headline, an arrest report, a mugshot, a leak to TMZ or ESPN. The story spreads before the facts do. Within hours, talking heads debate motives, teams issue statements, and fans draw battle lines on social media. In this new age, the court of public opinion convenes long before the real one. The NFL's brand of justice runs on two systems, legal and corporate. A player may stand before a judge in one, and before the commissioner in the other. The punishments rarely align. The law determines guilt. The league determines optics. A 6-game suspension can feel harsher than a misdemeanor conviction, not because it carries jail time, but because it reshapes perception. The one currency no athlete can fully reclaim. The 2014 Ray Rice case became the inflection point. When footage surfaced of Rice assaulting his then-fiancée in an elevator, the reaction was swift and merciless. But what made it seismic wasn't the act itself. It was the contrast between what the league knew and what the public saw. The NFL had suspended Rice for 2 games. When the video emerged, that decision looked indefensible. Commissioner Roger Goodell faced his own kind of trial, accused not of violence, but of complicity. The lesson was brutal and clear. In the era of total visibility, justice delayed is reputation destroyed. That moment forced the NFL to formalize its personal conduct policy, a set of rules that blurred the line between employer discipline and moral arbitration. Players could now be punished, not for crimes, but for behavior deemed detrimental to the league. It gave the commissioner sweeping power to act unilaterally, to protect the shield. But in doing so, it created a legal gray zone where one man's judgment outweighed due process. The tension between image and justice has defined every high-profile case since. When star running back Adrian Peterson was indicted for child abuse, when quarterback Deshaun Watson faced dozens of allegations of sexual misconduct, when Aldon Smith was arrested multiple times for DUIs and weapons charges, each case forced the league to navigate a minefield of morality, media, and money. For players, the consequences extend far beyond suspension. Legal battles consume time, resources, and psychological stability. Every deposition, every subpoena becomes another arena. Attorneys specializing in athlete representation describe these cases as career triage, balancing the legal defense with the management of public fallout. Law firms now double as PR firms. Crisis communication becomes part of the legal strategy. Most fans never see the machinery behind the headlines, the lawyers hired by teams, the private investigators tracking evidence, the consultants crafting apologies before verdicts are reached. Behind every scandal lies an invisible economy of damage control. Agents coordinate with publicists. Teams consult with ownership. The league's lawyers monitor every statement. The narrative is managed minute by minute, like a high-stakes game plan. And yet, the NFL's greatest courtroom battles have never been between players and prosecutors. They've been between players and the league itself. From concussion lawsuits to labor grievances, these cases reveal a deeper conflict over control and accountability. In 2013, after years of mounting medical evidence, the NFL agreed to a $765 million settlement with thousands of former players who alleged the league concealed the long-term dangers of head trauma. The payout was historic, but it came without admission of wrongdoing. The case, like so many others, ended not in justice, but in exhaustion, a transaction of silence. That same tension played out again in 2017, when Colin Kaepernick sued the NFL for collusion, arguing that his peaceful protest against racial injustice led to his blacklisting. The league settled quietly, without admitting guilt, but the message reverberated beyond football. It exposed the hidden boundary between personal conviction and corporate loyalty, and how swiftly the machinery of the league can close ranks when ideology threatens profit. The NFL's legal entanglements reflect its cultural duality. It is both a mirror of America and an exception to it. The same system that grants second chances to some players buries others under scrutiny. A superstar may return after scandal. A journeyman may never play again. Justice in the NFL, much like in society, is uneven, influenced by fame, skill, and the economics of forgiveness. Even outside criminal law, players find themselves in constant legal motion. Contract disputes become arbitration cases. Injury claims evolve into class actions. Copyright battles over nicknames and slogans clog federal dockets. Every piece of the NFL, from media rights to memorabilia, exists under legal tension. But beneath all the legal maneuvering lies a quieter truth. The players live under surveillance in every sense. Their lives are contractually public. Their actions, their posts, their movements can all be interpreted as liability. The private self, the one that exists outside the helmet and camera, is shrinking. And when mistakes occur, whether criminal or simply human, the reckoning is amplified beyond proportion. Still, amid the wreckage, there are stories of resilience of players who confronted the system and rebuilt. Michael Vick, after serving 21 months in federal prison, returned to the field humbled, rehabilitated, and ultimately redeemed in the eyes of many. It was a rare full-circle moment in a league that often consumes and discards. His return didn't erase the past, but it reminded America of an uncomfortable truth. Redemption, like punishment, is selective and always filtered through profitability. The courtroom may be the place where football's myths collide with reality, but it's also where those myths are reborn. The NFL knows this. It understands that every legal scandal, however damaging, can be absorbed into the grand narrative of redemption, perseverance, and image restoration. The league's empire doesn't crumble under controversy. It metabolizes it. And yet, every time a player walks into a courthouse wearing a tailored suit instead of a jersey, a little more of the game's innocence dies. Every headline about assault, fraud, or conspiracy corrodes the illusion of separation between sport and society. The NFL cannot control human behavior, but it can control the narrative, and that, more than justice, is what it has perfected. In the end, football's relationship with the law is less about guilt or innocence and more about containment, about keeping the mess within the frame of entertainment. But for the men who live it, those who've stood before judges and cameras alike, the lesson is unrelenting. The system forgives talent faster than it forgets scandal. And for a league built on the myth of meritocracy, that might be its most revealing truth of all. When the cameras cut away, when the roar fades and the last helmet is placed on its shelf, the body remains. Every scar, every compression, every nerve still humming from the violence of the game, all of it remains. Football, perhaps more than any other sport, has a cruel aftertaste. the invisible contract written in pain. The league sells heroism, but what the players often buy with their lives is silence. The medical bargain at the heart of the NFL is simple and devastating performance for survival. Treatment for compliance. Teams employ doctors, but those doctors answer to franchises. Players trust medical staff, but their salaries depend on returning to play. The tension between health and money has always been the quietest, darkest war in football. And as history shows, it's a war few win cleanly. Back in 1994, when the league first formed its mild traumatic brain injury committee, it wasn't to reveal the truth, it was to contain it. Concussions had long been treated as badges of toughness. A player staggering to his feet after a hit was cheered as a warrior, not pitied as a casualty. But behind closed doors, neurologists and trainers knew what was happening. Repetitive trauma, subconcussive blows that seemed harmless in isolation, were leaving microscopic wreckage that would one day bloom into something monstrous. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. The NFL's official position for years was denial. In press conferences and scientific papers, a league-funded committee suggested that football had no link to long-term brain injury. It wasn't until outside researchers, most notably Dr. Bennett Omalu and later Dr. Ann McKee, began exposing the truth that the facade cracked. By then, hundreds of players had died or descended into early dementia, depression, and rage. Their stories became the real ledger of the game's cost. Money flowed to settle the reckoning. In 2016, the NFL agreed to pay up to $1 billion to retired players suffering from neurological disorders. On paper, it looked like accountability. But in practice, the system turned diagnosis into a financial maze. Players were required to prove cognitive decline through testing that critics argued was biased. Tests that, until public outrage forced a change, even included race norming, which assumed black players started with lower baseline cognitive scores. The implication was chilling. Your worth, even in sickness, could still be adjusted for race. Yet for many current players, the calculus hasn't changed much. The season is short. The average career spans less than 4 years. Missed games mean missed money, missed visibility, missed leverage in the next contract negotiation. The economics of football reward durability more than honesty. So players learn to lie to themselves, to doctors, to everyone watching. Ask any former player, and you'll hear a version of the same confession. I played hurt. Torn ligaments, numbed by injections. Fractured ribs, wrapped and ignored. Painkillers swallowed like vitamins. The ritual of self-destruction is so normalized that it barely registers as tragic anymore. Trainers tape the damage, coaches call it grit, fans call it legacy. Only the families see what it becomes, the fathers who forget their children's names, the hands that shake uncontrollably at 50. The economics behind this cycle are ruthless. Every player's body is an investment portfolio managed by others. Insurance companies, team physicians, front offices, all with stakes in minimizing liability. The NFL's collective bargaining agreements outline rights to medical privacy and second opinions, but the power imbalance is obvious. Teams decide who gets cleared, who gets cut, and who gets paid. Medical independence is often theoretical. Career survival is not. Then there's the business of pain itself, a billion-dollar industry within the billion-dollar game. For decades, team doctors distributed opioids and anti-inflammatories in locker rooms with assembly line efficiency. Lawsuits later revealed how casual it all was, players being handed pills without records, dosages, or warnings. The goal wasn't healing. The goal was return to play. Some of those players would later die from overdoses, others from organ failure, many from the slow corrosion of dependency. The 2010s brought reform. Independent neurological consultants were placed on sidelines. Concussion protocols were standardized. Helmet technology advanced. But even now, the system bends to profit. Players in contract years push through injuries. Teams weigh playoff odds against long-term harm. A single playoff berth can be worth tens of millions in television revenue. A player's spinal disc, by contrast, is replaceable. Health insurance for retirees is another battlefield. The NFL Player Care Foundation and the benefits programs established under union negotiations offer assistance, but only to a point. Many retired players say navigating the process feels adversarial, as though the league's default setting is denial. "They make you prove you're broken," one veteran said in a deposition. "And even then, they act like you're exaggerating." This tension between loyalty and liability runs deeper than medicine. It's cultural. Football has always glorified suffering. From Pop Warner to the pros, players are taught to equate pain with pride. To admit weakness is to jeopardize your place in the tribe. It's a psychology that benefits everyone except the person bleeding for it. Yet the conversation around health is shifting slowly. Younger players speak out more freely. The NFL's partnership with the NFLPA to fund health studies and independent care clinics is growing. The public, armed with documentaries, lawsuits, and visible tragedies, demands accountability. But as long as the league's business model depends on spectacle, as long as violence remains the product, the medical bargain will never fully dissolve. It will simply be rewritten in cleaner language. Consider the case of Andrew Luck, one of the few who walked away. At 29, he retired not because he couldn't play, but because he couldn't heal. His body was a map of surgeries and scar tissue. His decision shocked the sport, but his explanation was hauntingly simple. "It's taken my joy away." That single sentence echoed like a confession from every man who ever chose pain over peace. Contrast that with the silent suffering of those who couldn't afford to quit. Linebackers who hide migraines with caffeine, linemen who lose mobility before 40, veterans who forget what day it is. These aren't anomalies. They're the cost of doing business. Even outside the physical realm, the health crisis morphs into something psychological. Depression, anxiety, and post-career identity collapse haunt retired athletes. The adrenaline, the crowd, the structure, all gone overnight. Without mental health infrastructure, many spiral. The headlines of suicides and breakdowns aren't just tragedies. They're symptoms of an untreated epidemic. As medicine advances and the NFL's image grows more global, the league walks a tightrope between empathy and economics. It funds awareness campaigns, sponsors youth safety initiatives, and donates to research institutions. But the question remains, can a machine built on controlled destruction ever be truly safe? Every hit still echoes. Every tackle still subtracts. Behind the streaming deals and luxury boxes, the body count persists, not in morgues, but in the quiet suffering of men who gave everything to a game that measured them in yards, not years. That is the hidden cost of glory, a league that promises immortality but leaves its players haunted by their own anatomy. And until health is valued beyond availability, every medical breakthrough will still be a financial negotiation, not a moral one. Because in the end, the bargain hasn't changed. The player provides the body. The league provides the stage, and both pretend the other isn't keeping score. There is a peculiar kind of silence that follows retirement in the NFL. Not the peaceful kind, but the hollow one. The silence of phones that stop ringing, endorsements that dry up, and a body that suddenly begins collecting debts it's been owed for years. For decades, players dreamed of the day they could walk away. Few realized how brutal that walk would be. Retirement in football isn't an exit, it's a reckoning. The league celebrates farewells with speeches, highlight reels, and handshakes. But when the cameras turn away, reality hits like a blindside tackle. Most players don't retire rich. They retire uncertain about their health, their future, their place in a world that has already moved on. The average NFL career lasts just over 3 years. 3 seasons to make enough money to last a lifetime. 3 seasons to secure benefits meant to support a lifetime of damage. And yet, even among those who earn millions, financial ruin is alarmingly common. Sports. Illustrated Investigation once estimated that nearly 80% of retired players face financial stress or bankruptcy within a few years of leaving the game. The reasons aren't mysterious: inflated lifestyles, poor investment advice, divorce, child support, and most tragically, the belief that the checks will never stop coming. Then there's the pension fight, the slow bureaucratic struggle that has turned many veterans into plaintiffs. The NFL's pension system dates back to 1959, a time when the average player made less than $10,000 a season and most held off-season jobs. Over time, the system evolved into a maze of tiers, credits, and eligibility windows, all designed to reflect a changing game. But the complexity hides injustice. For players who retire before 1993, TIA benefits are significantly lower than those who came after a generational divide born of collective bargaining and timing. It's not uncommon to find men who built the modern league Super Bowl veterans. Hall of Fame caliber athletes living on monthly pension checks that wouldn't cover today's rent in major cities. Some receive less than $2,000 a month after decades of sacrifice. Meanwhile, the league's annual revenues have crossed $20 billion. The moral dissonance is hard to ignore. The NFL Players Association has pushed for reforms, and some progress has been made, most notably through the 2020 Collective Bargaining Agreement, which expanded benefits for certain retired players and provided additional health stipends. But for every success story, there are a dozen quiet failures. Men too proud to beg, too injured to work, and too forgotten to matter. The most public pension battles reveal a grim truth. Players' value to the league often expires the moment they stop contributing to its spectacle. Consider the case of the Plan 88 benefits. Named after the number worn by the late John Mackey, a Hall of Fame tight end who suffered from dementia. The program provides assistance to players diagnosed with neurocognitive disorders, but accessing it requires endless paperwork, testing, and appeals. For families already dealing with confusion and despair, the process becomes another punishment. And then there's healthcare. In theory, the NFL's post-career benefits should provide a cushion. In reality, they often expose the cracks in a system designed more for optics than compassion. Players are eligible for 5 years of healthcare coverage after retirement. 5 years to deal with a lifetime of orthopedic injuries, neurological damage, and degenerative conditions. After that window closes, many face the same grim choice as millions of ordinary Americans: pay astronomical premiums or go without. Some former players rely on the NFL Player Care Foundation, which offers grants for medical bills and surgeries. Others turn to the newly established Trust, a wellness initiative funded jointly by the NFL and NFLPA to provide physical and mental health support. These programs save lives, but they're triage, not justice. The system still treats long-term care as charity, not obligation. The cruelest irony is that players who define the modern entertainment economy of football, whose sweat and sacrifice built billion-dollar franchises, often spend their final decades battling for recognition. They watch as rookies sign contracts worth more in one season than they earned in their entire careers. They see stadiums filled with fans who know their names but not their struggles. And they wonder if loyalty ever went both ways. There's also the psychological cliff. Retirement strips away identity in a way few professions can match. For years, players are conditioned to be gladiators, disciplined, praised, necessary. Then, almost overnight, they become ordinary. The adrenaline is gone, the structure gone, the applause gone. The sudden vacuum leaves many adrift. Depression, addiction, and suicide haunt locker rooms long after the game's end. The league and union now acknowledge this. Mental health counseling is more accessible. Career transition programs, financial literacy workshops, and alumni mentorship networks exist. Yet participation remains uneven. The culture of invincibility, the myth that to seek help is to show weakness, persists even in retirement. I thought I was tough enough to handle life after football, one veteran confessed in a 2022 interview. Turns out, life hit harder than any linebacker ever could, even for those who transition well. The ghosts remain physical. Artificial hips, fused vertebrae, chronic pain. Former linemen walk like men twice their age. Fingers bend in directions nature never intended. Many can't lift their kids without wincing. And because post-retirement medical benefits are so limited, countless former players rely on disability claims, a process often compared to trench warfare. The NFL's disability plan is notoriously strict. To qualify, players must prove that their conditions prevent them from any form of gainful employment. Even then, payments can be contested or revoked. In 2022, several retired players sued the league, alleging systemic bias and delay tactics designed to discourage claims. For them, the injury wasn't just physical, it was institutional. A few high-profile cases forced small victories. Settlement funds for concussion-related illnesses, lifetime health plans for the most severely injured, and reforms in the appeals process. But the bureaucracy remains dense. The stories echo the same refrain. The league protects its brand first, its players second. To understand the scope of this long tale of care, you have to listen to the wives, children, and caretakers, the quiet witnesses. They see what the public doesn't. The forgetfulness, the rage, the helpless nights. They fill out the forms, manage the medications, and hold together what's left of men once worshipped as heroes. Many have become activists, forcing the league to face its moral ledger. Still, some choose grace over bitterness. They start charities, mentor younger athletes, advocate for reform. They speak about balance, about preparing for the end while still inside the game. Because they learned the hardest truth of all, the NFL doesn't teach you how to stop being a football player. Retirement is supposed to mean rest. For too many, it means restitution, fighting to reclaim dignity from a system that long ago moved on to the next rookie, the next highlight, the next Sunday. The league will honor them at halftime ceremonies, feature them in nostalgia reels, sell their jerseys anew. But when the lights go down, many still sit at kitchen tables, sorting bills, fighting pain, and wondering whether it was worth it. Football's mythology is built on the idea of legacy that the game remembers, but in reality, it forgets faster than anyone wants to admit. And the men left behind are reminders that even glory has an expiration date. The NFL's pension system is not just a financial debate, it's a moral one. How a nation's most popular sport treats its wounded tells us more about its soul than any championship ever could. And so, every former player becomes a kind of ledger entry, a living record of what happens when fame fades, when the roar dies, and when the game refuses to care for the hands that built it. Every dynasty, no matter how invincible it looks on Sunday, hides fractures beneath the helmets. The cameras show unity, a brotherhood charging toward victory. But behind closed doors, the locker room is an ecosystem built on tension. It's the place where money, fame, and human nature collide. Football is supposed to be the ultimate team game, but inside the NFL, it's also the most individual. Every snap, every tackle, every play is a resume moment, a statement for the next contract, the next endorsement, the next ranking. Teammates share a jersey, but they're also competing for the same limited currency. Opportunity, and opportunity in this league can vanish in a single play. There is a saying among veterans, you re-friends until the depth chart comes out. That's when the real game begins. Coaches insist on family unity, but the business side of football breeds silent rivalries. The first-round pick brought in to learn from a veteran isn't there to learn, he's there to replace him. The veteran knows it, the rookie knows it. Every rep in practice becomes a negotiation for survival. It's in those quiet, in-between moments, the cafeteria, the film room, the sideline where psychological warfare unfolds. Veterans guard their knowledge like trade secrets. Rookies watch every gesture, every word, trying to read what's safe to emulate and what's a setup. Bonds form, but so do factions. Money makes the divide sharper. A young player on a rookie deal can look across the locker room at a star earning $20 million a year and feel both awe and resentment. And when bonuses depend on playing time, every snap another man takes can feel like theft. The league's salary structure fuels these invisible hierarchies. Even within the same team, inequality reigns. Consider the modern quarterback, often the face of a franchise, the one whose paycheck dwarfs everyone else's. It's not just economics, it's symbolic power. When a quarterback signs a record deal, the locker room feels it. Some celebrate it. Others quietly measure their own worth against it. And when the offense falters, that tension surfaces in subtle ways. A lineman who lets a rusher through half a second late. A receiver who runs the wrong route just once too often. No one talks about it publicly, but it's understood. The NFL is not a meritocracy. It's a hierarchy with shifting loyalties. And the higher a player climbs, the more isolated he becomes. The great dynasties all faced it. The early 2000s Patriots, a fortress of discipline, nearly fractured over the Brady-Belichick divide. As loyalty and credit became competing currencies. The 1990s Cowboys imploded under the weight of egos as large as their talent. Even the 1985 Bears, football's most intimidating unit, were torn by internal jealousies. Winning hid it temporarily, but never erased it. The media amplifies these rivalries, sometimes inventing them, sometimes exposing them. A leaked comment, a sideline outburst, a cryptic tweet, all can spark weeks of speculation. For players, perception becomes a second battlefield. To the world, they are teammates. To one another, they're competitors trapped in the same cage, judged by metrics they can't control. The pressure to maintain composure, to perform, to coexist with men who might be plotting your replacement, is psychologically punishing. Many players learn to compartmentalize emotion, to shake hands with rivals every morning and celebrate with them on Sundays. But the facade is thin. Behind the scenes, trust is currency, and betrayal is expected. Then there's leadership, the most misunderstood quality in sports. Fans assume the best player is the leader, but leadership in a locker room is earned differently. It's not about talent, it's about credibility. Players can sense authenticity instantly. They know who's there for the paycheck, who's there for the team, and who's there to rewrite their own legend. A real leader is rare, the one who can bridge millionaires and journeymen, starters and backups, stars and rookies. When leadership fails, chaos follows. Coaches try to contain it, but culture is fragile. One unchecked feud, one ego-driven speech, one teammate who goes to the media, and the foundation cracks. The worst part, one former linebacker told Sports Illustrated, is when the locker room starts keeping score of who's getting credit. That's when you know the season's already lost. In recent years, social media has made internal politics more volatile. Teammates no longer just talk, they post. Subtweets, likes, and emojis have replaced whispered rumors. A player can express frustration publicly with a single click, and within minutes, the entire team feels it. Coaches call it the digital locker room, a new, unregulated space where hierarchies are reinforced or destroyed. Some teams embrace the conflict, believing tension sharpens performance. Others suffocate under it. The truth is that no team, no matter how disciplined, escapes it entirely. Because football isn't just about alignment and playbooks, it's about identity. Every player wants to matter. Every player fears irrelevance. And in a world where one bad season can erase a name, rivalry becomes survival instinct. One of the most compelling examples of internal struggle came from the Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom era. The defense, led by Richard Sherman, Chancellor, and Earl Thomas, was the beating heart of the team's identity. But the offense, led by Russell Wilson, was the face of it. As Wilson's fame grew, defensive players quietly bristled at what they saw as preferential treatment. When the team lost Super Bowl 49 on a goal line interception, The fissure widened into a fault line. The defense felt betrayed, not just by the play call, but by the politics behind it. That single moment altered the chemistry of one of the most dominant teams of the decade. Money, ego, and media pressure don't create rivalry. They magnify it. They expose what's already fragile. Every player enters the league wanting to belong, but the system rewards individual glory more than collective sacrifice. And that imbalance poisons even the strongest bonds. Still, some rivalries become legends that define eras. Think of Joe Montana and Steve Young, two Hall of Fame quarterbacks forced to share a franchise that could only belong to one. For years, they coexisted uneasily, trading wins and headlines until the inevitable torch passing. The beauty of that rivalry was that it pushed both men to their limits. It made history, even as it destroyed camaraderie. Modern NFL locker rooms are microcosms of corporate America, competitive, political, image-driven. Only here, the stakes aren't promotions or bonuses, they're legacy and survival. Every athlete knows that one bad season can be the difference between a pension and obscurity. That pressure distorts relationships in ways no outsider can fully grasp. And yet, for all the rivalry and betrayal, there's still a strange love that binds teammates. They share trauma, the injuries, the exhaustion, the fear of the end. They understand one another in ways no one else can. That shared suffering creates its own form of loyalty, one that outlasts the contracts and headlines. Even enemies on the same team often reunite years later with mutual respect, survivors of the same unforgiving machine. The paradox of the locker room is that it's both battlefield and sanctuary. Players will fight, argue, resent, and even sabotage. But when game day comes, instinct takes over. Brotherhood reemerges, if only for a few hours. They may hate one another Monday through Saturday, but on Sunday, they bleed the same colors. What happens when that delicate balance collapses? When money, ego, and power consume the trust that once held it all together. That's when the real unraveling begins. The moment when a team stops being a team and becomes a collection of contracts wearing the same logo. And in a league built on unity and sacrifice, nothing is more dangerous than that kind of quiet division. Power in the NFL doesn't begin on the 50-yard line. Begins in the owner's suites, the glass towers high above the field, where billionaires make decisions that ripple through cities, states, and even Congress. Every Sunday, players risk their bodies for inches of turf. But the real victories, the ones that reshape economies, are negotiated in boardrooms. This is the hidden theater of the sport. The politics of ownership, the business of stadiums, and the leverage of money wrapped in civic pride. The NFL sells itself as a public good, a shared cultural inheritance. It's the Sunday ritual, the unifier, the one arena where Americans of every background converge. But behind that mythology lies a ruthless calculus, one where private franchises use public dollars to build empires. Stadiums become monuments, not to sport, but to influence. The average cost of an NFL stadium today exceeds $1.5 billion. Most are financed through complex public-private partnerships, where local governments shoulder massive debt to keep the team or attract a new one. Politicians frame it as investment, job creation, urban renewal, tourism. In reality, study after study has shown the same result. The economic benefits rarely match the promises. A 2020 Brookings Institution report concluded that publicly funded stadiums almost never pay for themselves. But by the time those findings emerge, the deals are already inked, the votes cast, the bonds issued. The modern stadium boom began in the 1990s, as owners discovered that new facilities weren't just about better fan experiences. They were economic weapons. They could threaten relocation to extract public subsidies. They could use taxpayer money to increase franchise value. They could rebrand themselves as economic partners rather than entertainment providers. And with the NFL's shield behind them, few politicians had the courage to say no. When Art Modell moved the Cleveland Browns to Baltimore in 1996, it was more than a relocation. It was a message. Modell claimed financial struggles and an outdated stadium. The city of Cleveland refused to meet his demands for public funding, so he took the team, history, and logo to Maryland. Cleveland fans were devastated, and the backlash was so severe that Congress briefly considered legislation to prevent franchise relocations. But Modell's gamble worked. The newly christened Ravens became a model for leverage. Cities learned the hard way: say no, and your team disappears. The NFL learned too. It codified the art of civic extortion. Teams would float relocation rumors, politicians would panic, and taxpayers would pay. Los Angeles, long without a team after the Rams and Raiders left in the 90s, became the perfect bluff card. For 2 decades, owners invoked the LA option to pressure their hometowns. Then, in 2016, Stan Kroenke called the bluff for real, moving the Rams back to Los Angeles and unveiling SoFi Stadium, a $5.5 billion behemoth in Inglewood. It was privately financed, yes, but with massive public infrastructure support and tax incentives. It instantly doubled the franchise's valuation and rewrote the playbook for future negotiations. For the owners, stadiums aren't civic landmarks, they're equity multipliers. Forbes estimates that a new facility can increase a franchise's market value by 30% or more. The Dallas Cowboys at A&T Stadium transformed Jerry Jones from a wealthy owner into a cultural monarch. Jones didn't just build a football field. He built a self-contained economy: restaurants, retail, events, even real estate developments surrounding the star. That template is now standard. Every stadium must be an entertainment district, every fan a consumer from kickoff to concert night. But for every success story like Jones, there's a civic reckoning somewhere else. Taxpayers in Las Vegas, for example, financed $750 million of Allegiant Stadium's $1.9 billion cost to lure the Raiders. The deal was sold as tourism-driven. The stadium would pay for itself through hotel taxes. But when the pandemic emptied Vegas hotels, taxpayers discovered the fragility of that promise. In St. Louis, meanwhile, residents were still paying off debt from the Rams' old stadium years after the team abandoned them for California. The owner's leverage extends beyond economics. It's political. They are donors, lobbyists, and power brokers who operate at the intersection of sports and policy. The NFL's collective ownership represents one of the most influential business networks in the country, with tentacles reaching into energy, construction, real estate, and tech. When owners want something, a zoning change, a tax break, a legislative exemption, they rarely hear no. In 2017, league's owners flexed that influence during the national anthem protests. As players knelt in protest of racial injustice, the backlash from politicians and media threatened the NFL's brand. Behind the scenes, owners debated policy, image, and revenue protection with the kind of urgency usually reserved for war rooms. Leaked reports revealed calls between owners and White House officials discussing how to contain the optics. The result wasn't consensus, it was compliance. The league implemented guidelines discouraging protests on the field, attempting to strike a balance between expression and profit. But the message was clear. The politics of the league would always be defined from the top down. And yet, owners are not immune to public backlash. When Daniel Snyder's Washington franchise faced scandals of workplace harassment and financial misconduct, congressional pressure mounted. What followed an unprecedented investigation forced transparency. And eventual sale showed that ownership isn't invincible. But even in disgrace, Snyder walked away with billions. That's the true measure of power in the NFL. Even failure is profitable. These men and a few women now joining their ranks occupy a paradoxical space. They depend on public emotion but operate through private interest. They invoke civic pride to justify public funding, yet their decisions often prioritize personal fortune over community welfare. To them, the team is an asset, not a legacy. Cities are markets, not homes. And fans, the lifeblood of the sport, are leverage. There's an old myth that fans own the game. In Green Bay, that's literally true. The Packers remain the only publicly owned franchise in professional sports. But everywhere else, ownership is concentrated among billionaires who trade loyalty like stock. The Packers model, nonprofit, community-driven, publicly accountable, is an anomaly that exposes how far the rest of the league has drifted from its roots. Every time a city celebrates a new stadium, it's worth asking who truly wins. Jobs, often temporary. Tax revenue, frequently overstated. Franchise value, always up. In many cases, stadiums accelerate gentrification, displace low-income residents, and redirect funds from schools, transit, and housing into luxury boxes. But the spectacle of football, the emotional weight of belonging, keeps the machine running. Politicians cut ribbons, fans buy jerseys, and the owners smile from the suites, knowing the cycle will repeat. In truth, the modern NFL owner isn't just a sports figure. He is a statesman of commerce. He controls narratives, shapes cities, and influences national policy. The stadium is his embassy, the franchise his government. And beneath the roar of the crowd lies the quiet hum of power. Deals brokered, favors exchanged, fortunes multiplied. It's easy to forget that the game itself is only part of the product. The real business of football is leverage, political, financial, emotional. And as long as fans keep cheering, the owners will keep building monuments to themselves with other people's money. The next time the camera pans over a glittering new stadium and a smiling owner cutting a ribbon, remember, what looks like progress is often profit in disguise. And what's sold as civic pride is sometimes the most sophisticated form of control. Football has always been more than a game. It is an arena where identity, culture, and power converge. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the fraught intersection of race and activism. Players are symbols, role models, and public property. And when they step into the political arena, they step into a minefield. Every statement, every gesture, every moment of silence carries a cost. For Black players, that cost has historically been higher than most can imagine. The NFL was segregated until 1946. Black athletes were barred from teams or relegated to token roles, often forced to endure hostility from coaches, owners, and even teammates. The league's early history is a reminder that the battle for civil rights extended far beyond city streets and courtrooms. It also played out in locker rooms and on gridirons. Men like Kenny Washington and Woody Strode were pioneers, but their opportunities were constrained by prejudice and politics. Fast forward to today, and the structure may have changed, but the cultural weight remains. Colin Kaepernick's kneeling in 2016 is the clearest modern manifestation of this tension. When he refused to stand for the national anthem, he invoked centuries of injustice in a single gesture. He said repeatedly that his protest was against systemic oppression, police brutality, and racial inequality, not the flag, not the military. But the backlash was swift and merciless. Sponsors threatened contracts, fans burned jerseys, commentators derided him on air, and the league initially attempted to silence him. Kaepernick's career effectively ended while he was still in his prime, a stark illustration of the cost of speaking out. Yet the story is not just about Kaepernick. It's about the countless athletes before and after him who navigate the treacherous waters of public dissent. Marshawn Lynch famously walked a tightrope, using cryptic humor and selective engagement to comment on social issues without fully alienating team management or fans. Players like Eric Reid, who supported Kaepernick, faced similar professional repercussions. The lesson was clear. The league's platform is powerful, but leverage is unevenly distributed. Activism comes with tangible consequences, especially for those who aren't the established stars with immunity from scrutiny. Race amplifies these stakes. When white players protest, media coverage and public reaction differ dramatically. The narrative often paints them as principled or thoughtful, whereas Black players are labeled disruptive or ungrateful. These double standards have existed for decades. In the 1960s and 70s, players like Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, and others faced public vilification for challenging social norms. Brown used his platform to advocate for civil rights, community investment, and political awareness. But it cost him endorsements and reputation. Ali, though not an NFL player, became a cautionary tale. Refusing the draft meant exile from his sport and global notoriety. The message was unmistakable. Athletic fame does not insulate one from consequences. The league's response to activism has evolved unevenly. In 2018, the NFL officially apologized to Kaepernick, instituted initiatives supporting social justice programs, and created the Inspire Change platform. But critics argue these moves are performative, a form of reputational management designed to mollify public opinion while protecting financial interests. Owners, after all, are primarily concerned with broadcast ratings, ticket sales, and sponsorships, and activism can be a threat to all three. Players themselves have had to learn the economy of protest. Speaking out is not just a moral decision, it is a strategic one. Those without financial cushion, without superstar status, often cannot afford the professional or social costs. Those with endorsement deals risk losing millions. Those in contract years risk being sidelined, traded, or quietly ignored. The calculus is brutal, and it forces players into a constant negotiation between conscience and career survival. It's also a media war. Social media amplifies both support and backlash exponentially. One tweet, one viral clip, and the consequences can be immediate. Online mobs, partisan pundits, and the 24-hour news cycle transform what should be personal convictions into national debates. A player's activism becomes commodified, weaponized, and misinterpreted. The stakes are not just social. They are economic, psychological, and existential. Historical context deepens the gravity. Consider the case of race and policing. NFL players, especially black athletes, experience the same systemic pressures as anyone in American society, but their visibility magnifies those pressures. Arrests, allegations, and off-field conflicts are scrutinized under a microscope that rewards sensationalism. Activism, therefore, is not merely political. It is personal. A negotiation with a society that both idolizes and punishes them. The league has tried to reconcile these tensions with selective reforms. Policies around social justice, education, community investment, and post-career support are advertised widely. But critics point out that these efforts often fail to address structural inequities, disparities in hiring practices, ownership demographics, and the disproportionate punishment of minority players. Progress exists, but it is partial and mediated by public relations strategy rather than moral clarity. Even today, players face micro-level retaliation. Team culture, coaching biases, and subtle exclusion shape who feels safe to speak and who does not. Younger athletes watch veteran reactions and learn the implicit rules. They see the consequences of missteps and adjust behavior accordingly. In this sense, the league functions like a cultural feedback loop, transmitting norms that reinforce both compliance and invisibility. Yet despite the risks, activism persists. Players have organized to influence league policies, vote on social issues, and fund community programs. The recent rise of collective action around voting rights, criminal justice reform, and economic inequality demonstrates that football is still a platform of power. The difference is that modern activism is mediated, strategic, and constantly negotiating between moral imperative and professional survival. The tension is personal as much as structural. Many players struggle with the weight of expectation to excel on the field, to represent their communities, and to avoid jeopardizing careers. Families, agents, and mentors weigh in, each with their own interpretation of risk. The NFL's unique visibility magnifies these pressures. Success or failure in activism can redefine an athlete's legacy, overshadowing accomplishments or highlighting injustices. Ultimately, race, protest, and speaking out are intertwined with every other dimension of the NFL: contracts, media, endorsements, and post-career consequences. Activism cannot be separated from economics or reputation because the league commodifies the very identities it asks players to navigate. Every gesture of conscience intersects with a marketplace of attention, and every marketplace enforces its own consequences. The price of speaking out is not merely professional, it is existential. It asks players to reconcile identity, risk, and responsibility within a system that profits from their silence and spectacle. It is, in many ways, the most consequential off-field battle in the modern NFL. In the NFL, the field is only half the story. The other half plays out in the shadows, where agents, media, and players engage in a complex, high-stakes dance, one that often determines perception, career trajectory, and financial power long before a ball is snapped. This is the triangle of influence, where information is currency, ethics are negotiable, and the line between advocacy and manipulation blurs. Agents are meant to be advocates, champions for their clients' financial and personal interests. But in a league where millions are on the line, advocacy can easily bleed into strategic media engagement. Leaks, selective truths, and timed revelations can pressure teams, manipulate negotiations, and influence public opinion. A tweet, an insider report, or a seemingly casual remark in an interview is rarely accidental. Behind the scenes, agents engineer narratives designed to maximize leverage, whether that's a bigger contract, a trade, or a coveted endorsement. Take, for instance, the case of Dez Bryant in 2014. During contract negotiations with the Dallas Cowboys, rumors leaked suggesting that Bryant was difficult in the locker room, while simultaneously media outlets reported on his superstar status and marketability. The timing was no coincidence. It created a dual narrative, one of risk for the team, one of inescapable value. The Cowboys had to weigh public perception against financial reality. The result? A negotiation that ultimately favored the player, but only after weeks of orchestrated media pressure. This interplay raises an ethical question. Where does advocacy end and manipulation begin? Agents exist to protect their clients, yet they operate in a system that rewards strategic leaks and penalizes transparency. Every disclosure, every hint, every subtle message is a calculated risk. Players must trust that their representatives will balance ambition with discretion. Yet history is littered with examples where that trust was violated. Agents sometimes prioritize deals, commissions, or relationships with media outlets over a client's long-term well-being. Media, for its part, thrives on these leaks. Sports journalism is incentivized by scoops and exclusives, not necessarily accuracy. Outlets compete for clicks, ratings, and subscriptions. A single leaked story about a holdout, injury, or locker room dispute can dominate headlines, create viral debate, and influence public sentiment. The symbiosis between agents and journalists is delicate. The agent needs coverage, the journalist needs news, and the player needs leverage. Yet all three can be pulled apart by misalignment or opportunism. Consider LeBron James in the NBA, though not an NFL player. His negotiation strategies provide insight into the ethics of sports media. James' team skillfully orchestrated selective leaks, creating public pressure that supported his moves without revealing full strategy. NFL agents have increasingly adopted similar tactics. Holdouts, trade requests, and injury disclosures are often timed to maximize negotiation advantage, knowing that public scrutiny can push a team's hand. Even traditional contract discussions, which were once private and bureaucratic, are now public theater. Reports on guaranteed money, bonuses, and cap hits dominate social media and 24-hour sports networks. Fans debate minutiae of contract language, often unaware that much of the information is shaped by narrative engineers. Agents understand that perception shapes reality. A player perceived as a rising superstar commands more leverage than one deemed overpaid or troublesome, even if performance metrics are similar. Leaks, however, come with peril. Missteps can alienate coaches, teammates, or executives. A poorly timed revelation about dissatisfaction or health can depress market value or invite unwelcome scrutiny. The triangle of player-agent media requires constant calibration. It's a psychological game as much as a financial one, demanding trust, timing, and the ability to anticipate consequences across multiple spheres simultaneously. Ethical gray zones abound. Take the 2019 saga of Odell Beckham Jr., whose agent publicly criticized the Cleveland Browns' handling of his client. The narrative painted Beckham as a misunderstood superstar trapped in an unsympathetic organization, igniting fan outrage and media debate. But internally, team executives claimed misrepresentation and manipulation of facts. The tension illustrates the fine line agents walk. They are negotiators, spin doctors, and storytellers, often in one persona. Players themselves are sometimes complicit in shaping these narratives, knowingly participating in strategic leaks or carefully worded interviews. Yet they also risk being misrepresented, as journalists may frame statements for maximum impact rather than nuance. In this ecosystem, truth becomes malleable. Reputation can rise or fall on a headline, a quote, or a carefully timed story. The most successful players are those who understand the triangle intuitively, how to protect their image, leverage leaks, and maintain ethical balance while maximizing outcomes. History shows that mismanagement can be catastrophic. Contracts collapse, sponsorships vanish, and public opinion shifts in hours. Players like Johnny Manziel experienced rapid ascent and dramatic decline, in part because of the media machinery, amplified by agents' inability to stabilize the narrative. The triangle, when poorly navigated, becomes a trap. Conversely, skillful navigation can amplify legacy. Aaron Rodgers and his agent, for example, have cultivated a reputation for negotiating with both precision and strategic media engagement. Rodgers' holdouts, trade rumors, and public statements are rarely impulsive. They're carefully choreographed to influence perception while advancing career goals. The result is a player who seems always in control, even in the eye of controversy. The triangle also affects collective bargaining. Agents and media shape public discourse around salary caps, revenue sharing, and player rights. When stories highlight inequities or mismanagement, the union can leverage public opinion in negotiations. Conversely, when agents manipulate narratives to favor individual clients, collective unity can be strained. It's a constant tension between personal gain and communal interest, a microcosm of the league itself. Social media has amplified this dynamic exponentially. Instagram posts, Twitter commentary, and TikTok clips bypass traditional journalism, giving players direct access to the public. But this direct line does not eliminate the triangle. It reshapes it. Agents now advise on digital strategy, content timing, and crisis management. Leaks and statements that once traveled through press conferences now hit feeds instantly, magnifying stakes and shortening reaction times. At the heart of the agent-player media triangle lies trust, fragile, conditional, and constantly tested. A player must trust the agent to protect both career and reputation. The agent must trust media outlets to treat strategic disclosures as leverage rather than exploitation. And the media must trust that access, sources, and relationships will continue to flow if they cooperate with the agent's timing and narrative framing. Break any link and the consequences reverberate. Contracts lost, image tarnished, and careers altered. Perhaps the most profound consequence of this triangle is psychological. Players are always aware of the narrative machinery of headlines, leaks, and commentary. They learn to preempt criticism, calculate statements, and maintain a performative persona even off the field. Some thrive in this environment, mastering self-branding and influence. Others, unprepared or unwilling, struggle, finding that off-field battles are as consequential as any sack or touchdown. In a league where billions circulate and attention is currency, The agent-player media triangle is the unseen arena where careers are won and lost. Leaks and ethics are tools, but they are double-edged. Every negotiation, every headline, every carefully timed revelation is part of a larger war over perception, control, and legacy. In the end, understanding this triangle is essential to understanding the modern NFL. It explains why some players ascend, why others collapse under pressure, and why the off-field narrative now rivals the on-field spectacle in consequence and drama. The game may be played on Sundays, but battles in the triangle rage every day, shaping legacies long before the final whistle blows. The NFL is no longer just an American spectacle. It is a global enterprise. It's an entertainment juggernaut whose ambitions extend far beyond the borders of the United States. Internationalization, technological innovation, and the pursuit of new revenue streams have transformed the league into a sprawling ecosystem, one where opportunity, conflict, and the promise of unprecedented wealth collide with risk, inequity, and untested territory. The journey toward global expansion began quietly, with the 1980s and 1990s serving as experimental laboratories. NFL Europe, launched in 1991 as the World League of American Football, was the league's first serious attempt to test international appetites. London, Frankfurt, and Barcelona became temporary homes for budding franchises, training players, and courting foreign fans. The league's intent was clear: American football could be exported, provided it was presented as both spectacle and cultural export. Yet the league learned quickly that success would require more than just games. It required infrastructure, media rights, and local investment. Today, the NFL's international footprint is significant. The London Games, initially a novelty, have become annual fixtures, drawing tens of thousands of fans and millions of viewers worldwide. Mexico City hosts occasional matchups, and talks continue about games in Germany, Canada, and beyond. But these markets are not neutral. They are arenas of negotiation, branding, and leverage. Players are now ambassadors, sometimes unwillingly, navigating cross-cultural expectations, travel logistics, and performance pressure in foreign stadiums. A mistake abroad can have ripple effects: lost endorsements, diminished media coverage, and public scrutiny in multiple countries simultaneously. Tech is the new frontier in this globalization strategy. Streaming platforms, digital subscriptions, and exclusive content deals have opened revenue streams previously unimaginable. NFL Game Pass, Amazon Prime broadcasts, and league-controlled apps allow the league to monetize viewership globally, bypassing traditional cable contracts. While fans gain unprecedented access, the players face new pressures. Every highlight, every misstep, every social media post is instantly archived and amplified to a global audience. Mistakes no longer have geographic limits. Their repercussions are international, permanent, and measurable. The digital revolution extends beyond streaming. NFTs, fantasy collectibles, and blockchain partnerships promise massive profits, but also introduce new complications. Consider the league's experimentation with digital trading cards and player-linked assets. For players, these deals can supplement income and amplify brand recognition. But they also open doors to complex legal questions, licensing disputes, and ethical dilemmas. Who owns the rights to a player's likeness? What obligations exist when a digital asset's value collapses overnight? These questions were once irrelevant. Now, they're central to contracts, negotiations, and even labor relations. Esports represents another frontier. Partnerships between NFL teams and competitive gaming leagues blur the line between physical sport and virtual competition. Franchises see opportunity, cross-promotional campaigns, new audiences, and additional revenue. Players, however, face distraction and brand entanglement. Their performance is no longer judged solely on the field, but in the convergence of digital influence, sponsorship compliance, and personal branding across platforms. For rookies, this means balancing the traditional demands of football with an entirely new ecosystem that can elevate or destabilize a career. Internationalization, technology, and new markets also magnify existing inequalities. Top-tier quarterbacks or elite receivers may reap vast rewards from NFT deals, streaming partnerships, or global appearances. Meanwhile, lesser-known players, backups, practice squad members, or fringe veterans are often excluded from these opportunities, widening the financial and social gap within teams. This uneven distribution mirrors the broader NFL ecosystem, where the richest, most visible players leverage new revenue to consolidate wealth, while others remain tethered to traditional, lower-paying contracts. The league itself profits by controlling the narrative. Streaming rights, media content, and digital assets are curated to maximize engagement and monetization. Every game is now an algorithmically enhanced product. NFL Films footage, archived highlights, and behind-the-scenes content are packaged not just for fans, but for the global attention economy. Players must navigate this landscape carefully, aware that a poorly timed post or misinterpreted statement can affect international markets, sponsorships, and future earning potential. Contracts have evolved in response. Modern agreements increasingly include clauses covering digital rights, international obligations, social media conduct, and esports participation. Teams can withhold bonuses, limit appearances, or enforce licensing agreements. The modern player is bound not just by salary and performance metrics, but by participation in a complex web of global commerce. Compliance is no longer optional. It is integral to career sustainability. Global expansion also introduces cultural challenges. Players who travel abroad must contend with differing media expectations, fan behavior, and even political sensitivities. A statement acceptable in one country may provoke backlash in another. Endorsements in international markets may require linguistic adaptation, legal navigation, and cultural intelligence. For some, this is an exciting opportunity. For others, it is an additional source of stress layered atop the already punishing physical demands of the game. The stakes are visible in financial outcomes. International games, streaming rights, and digital innovations have increased league revenue to unprecedented levels. Yet players have historically captured only a fraction of the wealth they helped generate. Collective bargaining agreements are slowly evolving to account for these new streams, but the pace is uneven, leaving room for exploitation and conflict. Owners, sponsors, and media corporations benefit disproportionately from global expansion, while the labor that produces the spectacle, the athletes, negotiates to keep pace. There are stories of winners and losers. Elite stars may see international exposure drive global endorsements worth tens of millions. Mid-tier players may receive exposure, but few tangible benefits. Fringe players, even with exceptional skill, risk being overshadowed, excluded from digital projects, and constrained by travel schedules. Internationalization and technology create layers of opportunity that expand inequality within the league, producing new tensions alongside old rivalries. Yet the potential is undeniable. The NFL's brand has transcended national borders, inspiring grassroots leagues in Europe, Asia, and South America. The global appetite for American football is growing, and technology accelerates it. Every digital highlight, NFT release, or international matchup strengthens the league's foothold while providing players a platform for cultural influence previously unimaginable. But this frontier comes with strings attached. Careers are now managed not only by on-field performance, but by media strategy, digital engagement, and global diplomacy. In navigating this new world, players must become multidimensional. They are athletes, entertainers, negotiators, and diplomats. Success is no longer measured solely in touchdowns or sacks, but in the ability to traverse global markets, leverage digital content, and protect personal brand amidst a rapidly shifting ecosystem. Mistakes are costly, but mastery can elevate a player from national star to global icon. The NFL's future, in short, is intertwined with globalization, technology, and the digital economy. The league's ambition is breathtaking, but it comes with trade-offs. Every new market generates both winners and losers. Every technological innovation creates fresh vectors for conflict. And every strategic decision, from streaming contracts to NFT launches, reverberates through player careers, team dynamics, and league governance. In the end, the next frontier is not just the field. It is a sprawling global network of commerce, attention, and influence. For the players, this is an arena as dangerous, rewarding, and unpredictable as any Sunday clash. Mastery, luck, and savvy are required in equal measure because the game has changed. The stakes have multiplied, and the world is watching. There is a quiet that descends after the last whistle. A silence unlike any roar of the crowd, where the stadium empties and the ghosts of the season linger on the turf. That silence is the final season, the one a player completes in public, yet from which he will never emerge unchanged. It is not defined by stats alone, not by championships or Pro Bowl appearances, but by the invisible ledger of choices, compromises, conflicts, and consequences that the game and the world around it exacts. It is the arena where off-field battles converge with the on-field narrative, rewriting legacies in ways no highlight reel can capture. Every player enters the league with a dream: to compete, to excel, to be immortalized in the memory of fans. Few leave unscathed by the invisible currents swirling around contracts. Agents, media, endorsement pressure, and the relentless gaze of public expectation. Even as the crowd cheers, the hidden battles are unfolding. Negotiations over money, strategic leaks to the press, legal threats, racial and political pressures, and the constant tension between self-preservation and personal conscience. It is in this crucible that character, legacy, and redemption are forged or fractured. Consider the story of a quarterback in his final season, who had spent his career under the weight of unrelenting media scrutiny. Injuries, contract holdouts, and public criticism had eroded his confidence. Yet he pressed on, aware that every decision off the field would be dissected as much as any play. In his mind, the field had become both sanctuary and prison. Behind closed doors, he navigated conversations with agents, sponsors, and league executives, negotiating not just money, but narrative control. Each public appearance was calculated, every interview framed to preserve dignity while mitigating exposure to scandal. He emerged with a career that, statistically, might have seemed solid, but whose true measure would be written in public perception. Relationships, and the enduring memory of those who watched him struggle, stumble, and sometimes soar. Redemption is rarely linear. It often arrives years after the final snap. After the glare of national attention fades, and in quiet acts rather than grand gestures. Players who confronted personal demons, addiction, legal missteps, public misjudgments have sometimes found a second life, defined less by their mistakes than by their willingness to reconcile, contribute, and reshape their narratives. Terrell Owens, for instance, is remembered both for on-field brilliance and tumultuous off-field moments. Yet in retrospect, many acknowledge the human complexity behind the headlines. A man negotiating fame, ego, and personal ambition under extraordinary scrutiny. Legacy, in these cases, is multidimensional. It encompasses triumph and failure, courage and misjudgment, visibility and private struggle. The opposite is also true. Players whose final seasons are consumed by controversy, scandal, or mismanagement often see their entire career recast through a prism of failure. In these cases, off-field battles, financial missteps, legal entanglements, or poorly navigated media storms eclipse on-field achievements. These statistics remain, but the story that endures is one shaped by human conflict, societal pressures, and the relentless machinery of modern sports culture. Even those who achieve remarkable feats are vulnerable. Reputation, unlike yards gained or touchdowns scored, is fragile and often entirely outside one's control. The economic dimension of legacy cannot be understated. Contracts, endorsements, and business ventures are more than mere income. They are instruments of memory and influence. A player who invests wisely, manages media perception, and navigates legal and political landscapes can create a post-career ecosystem that enhances reputation and sustains influence. Conversely, those who falter in these arenas risk not only financial instability, but the erosion of the narrative of their career. Money and visibility are inseparable from legacy in a world where every off-field decision becomes part of a permanent record. Human relationships are another invisible ledger. Family, teammates, coaches, and agents all intersect with a player's story, influencing both public perception and private fulfillment. A player may win a Super Bowl, yet alienate teammates through ego or mismanagement. Another may perform modestly but leave a locker room culture of respect and mentorship. These choices, often invisible to fans, weigh heavily in the final assessment of legacy. The off-field battles, conflicts over contracts, media narratives, and social responsibilities ripple outward, affecting not just the player but everyone in their orbit. Social responsibility and activism have also become central to how final seasons are evaluated. Players who leverage their platform to address injustice or promote community engagement are often remembered in a more nuanced light, regardless of statistical achievement. Colin Kaepernick, again, illustrates this phenomenon. His on-field performance is part of his story, but his off-field courage, controversy, and the societal dialogue he ignited define his enduring legacy. Similarly, players who avoid these pressures or remain silent may preserve short-term careers, but miss the opportunity to shape history beyond the game. The final season is thus as much moral as it is athletic, a negotiation between personal ethics, public expectation, and career imperatives. Physical and mental tolls also frame the final season. Concussions, chronic injuries, and the cumulative burden of a career in professional football weigh on cognition, emotion, and resilience. These realities complicate every decision. A contract holdout, a public statement, an endorsement agreement. What might appear as arrogance, disengagement, or miscalculation is often a coping mechanism for stress, uncertainty, and the relentless pace of professional sports. Understanding legacy requires empathy for these invisible battles, the private struggles that accompany public performance. The notion of the final season extends beyond the literal last year of play. It encompasses the period during which a player becomes aware of mortality, limitation, and the approaching conclusion of a public journey. During this season, each off-field decision, financial, legal, social, or political, is magnified. Choices that previously seemed inconsequential become defining. Reputation management, relationship repair, and strategic visibility converge into a high-stakes, compressed period of legacy formation. The public sees games, stats, and soundbites. The private reality is a labyrinth of calculation, reflection, and sometimes regret. Redemption, when it occurs, often comes from embracing this complexity. Players who reconcile past mistakes, engage with social issues, or mentor younger athletes leave an imprint that survives media cycles and statistical analysis. Even financial restitution, charitable work, or candid interviews contribute to narrative rehabilitation. Legacy, then, is not fixed at the final whistle, but continues to evolve, shaped by memory, testimony, and the ongoing cultural conversation surrounding a player's life and career. In this light, the NFL is both a crucible and a theater. Every season is a microcosm of life's larger struggles: the pursuit of achievement, the negotiation of identity, the balance between self-interest and social obligation, the navigation of moral and ethical terrain. Off-field battles are inseparable from athletic performance. They shape perception, determine opportunity, and define memory. Players' final season is a mirror, reflecting the full spectrum of choices made across years of public scrutiny, private negotiation, and human vulnerability. Perhaps the ultimate lesson of the final season is humility. No matter the fame, no matter the wealth, no matter the accolades, players remain subject to forces beyond control. Media scrutiny, social expectation, economic pressures, and human fallibility. Those who navigate these pressures with foresight, integrity, and courage are remembered for both what they accomplished on the field and how they confronted the relentless complexity of life off it. Those who falter provide cautionary tales, vivid examples of the price exacted by fame, money, and power. And yet, there is beauty in this complexity. The final season is also a stage for resilience, for unexpected grace, for the subtle victories that escape headlines. Players who reconcile, mentor, and contribute to society demonstrate that legacy is not determined solely by public opinion or statistics, but by the human capacity to adapt, reflect, and leave the world and the game better than it was found. In the end, the NFL's off-field battles, whether fought in boardrooms, courtrooms, social media, or civic arenas, are inseparable from the story of the game. They shape how players are remembered, how fans understand heroism, and how culture interprets achievement and failure. The final season is the ultimate synthesis of these forces. A reflective period where economics, ethics, performance, and identity converge. Here, the ledger of a career is balanced, not just in points and tackles, but in courage, resilience, and human consequence. This is the arena where redemption is earned, reputations are restored or tarnished, and the narrative of a life in football is crystallized. For the players, it is as intense and consequential as any playoff showdown. And for those who watch and remember, it is a testament to the full, complex humanity behind the helmet and the uniform. The enduring story of men who walked onto the field and never walked off the same way. As the crowd fades, as the stadium empties and the echoes of cheers and boos dissipate into the night, what remains is a quiet that is nearly unbearable. It is in this quiet that the true story of football is revealed. Not just the touchdowns, the tackles, or the glory, but the intricate, often invisible machinery that governs every moment of a player's life. NFL Darkside has traced that machinery. Moving from the glare of public spectacle to the shadowed corridors of negotiation, media manipulation, financial leverage, legal peril, and social consequence. Across 15 batches, we've seen the league not only as a sport, but as a crucible of human ambition and institutional power. A world in which every victory and every misstep resonates far beyond the field. At the heart of the league's drama lies a paradox. Football is both a game and a business. It's a spectacle and a moral theater. Players are simultaneously athletes, employees, celebrities, and commodities. Their bodies are trained for peak performance, yet their value extends far beyond physical achievement. Their likenesses are monetized, their personal narratives negotiated and sometimes weaponized, and their decisions scrutinized under a relentless public gaze. Every contract, every endorsement, every media interaction is a node in a network of influence where money, fame, and institutional control intersect. The tension between autonomy and commodification drives much of the off-field conflict we've explored, and it is this tension that defines the cost of being unavoidable in the NFL. Contracts are more than financial instruments. They are expressions of power. From the earliest holdouts to contemporary mega deals, they dictate opportunity, shape public perception, and, in many ways, determine who ascends and who is left behind. Agents, middlemen, and the intricate web of advisory relationships further complicate the calculus. Representation can be empowering or exploitative. Trust becomes a scarce commodity, and the stakes extend well beyond dollars, influencing personal dignity, career trajectory, and even long-term mental and physical health. We've witnessed how misaligned incentives can destroy careers, just as skillful advocacy can elevate players to unprecedented heights. Equally consequential are the invisible forces of media and reputation. Public perception is curated, amplified, and weaponized through traditional reporting and the instantaneous reach of social media. Players must negotiate these pressures daily, aware that a single headline or viral post can alter the arc of a career irrevocably. Leaks, selective narratives, and the symbiosis between agents and journalists form a complex ecosystem in which truth is negotiable and ethics, often ambiguous. The triangle of player, agent, and media is a constant negotiation of leverage, exposure, and control, and miscalculations here are as consequential as a poorly executed play. Social activism, race, and protest have emerged as defining dimensions of modern player legacy. We've traced the historical arc from the pioneers who broke color barriers to the contemporary athletes who kneel, speak, and act in the name of justice. The stakes are immense. Careers can be halted, reputations shredded, yet the platform remains a potent tool for social change. In the NFL, activism is not a sideline choice. It is a central part of the ethical and economic calculus. The cost of speaking out is both professional and existential, shaped by public perception, institutional tolerance, and the personal courage to confront deeply entrenched social inequities. Financial innovation and global expansion further complicate the landscape. International games, streaming contracts, NFTs, esports collaborations, and emerging digital markets have transformed the league into a global enterprise. Opportunities multiply for elite players, yet inequality within teams is magnified. Economic stakes intersect with moral and practical considerations, forcing athletes to manage brand, performance, and public persona in an increasingly complex, globalized ecosystem. In this new era, mastery of the game alone is insufficient. Navigation of media, technology, and commerce becomes equally essential to career longevity and post-career stability. Medical ethics and player welfare remain persistent fault lines. Concussions, chronic injuries, and the tension between treatment, disclosure, and franchise profitability illustrate the moral and practical compromises players face. Decisions about health are rarely private. They are entangled with financial incentives, media narratives, and contractual obligations. The human cost, both immediate and cumulative, is staggering. Lives are altered, sometimes irrevocably, by the very system designed to elevate talent and reward performance. Health becomes both a commodity and a moral dilemma, a measure of human resilience and institutional responsibility. The final season, the ultimate convergence of these threads, reveals the most profound truths. Here, legacy is forged or fractured. Choices made in the glare of publicity, under the pressure of contracts, in the shadow of social expectation, and in the calculus of health and economics, crystallize into enduring reputation. Redemption is possible, but conditional. Damnation is often public and unrelenting. Players become emblematic not just of athletic achievement, but of the cost of navigating a system that profits from their talent while exposing them to relentless pressure. The ledger is invisible to the average fan, yet its balance determines the narrative that history remembers. Throughout this documentary, one recurring question persists: who profits and who pays the price? Owners, agents, sponsors, and media conglomerates capture vast wealth and influence. Players, despite being the visible force of the league, absorb risk, scrutiny, and physical tolls. Social systems reward spectacle but rarely account for human consequence. Labor is rewarded, but only unevenly. Fame is granted, but only selectively. Legacy is shaped, but often arbitrarily, by factors beyond athletic control. The NFL is a mirror of larger societal dynamics, reflecting inequalities, moral ambiguities, and the human cost of commerce. And yet, amid the pressure, controversy, and exploitation, there is undeniable beauty. Stories of resilience, mentorship, and courage remind us that football is not merely a system of exploitation, but also a theater of human possibility. Players who navigate adversity, reclaim reputation, or leverage their platform for positive impact demonstrate the enduring potential for agency, growth, and influence. They illustrate that even in a system designed to commodify the human element, empathy, ethics, courage, and perseverance remains decisive. As we reflect on the arc of this episode, the cumulative narrative is clear. The NFL's off-field battles are as consequential as its games. Money, fame, media, race, activism, and health converge in ways that shape careers, define legacy, and illuminate the moral and structural dynamics of a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. What the fan sees on Sundays, spectacular plays, championship runs, dramatic losses, is only part of the story. The hidden arena where human choices, institutional power, and economic imperatives collide is equally defining. Understanding this arena is essential to understanding the full measure of the game and its players. Finally, the moral reckoning is unavoidable. What responsibilities do owners, executives, and the league hold toward those whose labor generates immense wealth and cultural capital? How should players navigate a system that profits from spectacle but exacts profound personal cost? How do society, media, and fans reconcile their appetite for drama with the ethical implications of their engagement? These are not questions with easy answers. They demand reflection on the structures, incentives, and human consequences inherent in professional sport, and on the choices made every season, every game, and every negotiation. Football is a story of ambition, risk, triumph, and vulnerability. Its off-field battles reveal a deeper truth. The game is never merely a game. It is a reflection of human aspiration and frailty, of institutional power and individual consequence, of moral choice and economic calculus. The narratives of contracts, endorsements, media wars, social activism, and global expansion are intertwined with the personal journeys of those who inhabit the game. Players are heroes, entrepreneurs, activists, and often victims of the very system that celebrates them. And so, as the lights dim on the stadium and the echoes fade into memory, we are left with the complex truth of professional football. The brilliance and brutality of the NFL extend far beyond the field. It is a theater of human endeavor, a laboratory of power, and a mirror of society itself. Every touchdown, every tackle, every negotiation, every act of courage or misjudgment contributes to a story far larger than sport, one that reveals who profits, who sacrifices, and what it truly means to step into the spotlight and endure the cost of being unavoidable. This is the arc of the NFL's off-field battles. It is the story of ambition, of consequence, and of humanity under extreme pressure. It is a story that challenges us to see beyond the spectacle, to reckon with the structural inequities, and to honor the individuals who navigate a system that is as beautiful as it is brutal. In understanding this, we understand not only the game, but the men who play it, the choices they make, and the world they leave behind. The final lesson is both sobering and clear. In the NFL, as in life, the price of greatness is paid in ways unseen. The cost of fame is counted in moments invisible to the public. And the measure of legacy is written as much in courage, redemption, and human consequence as in statistics or trophies. Every player who walks off the field has paid that price. And every story we witness of triumph or failure, of advocacy or compromise, is a testament to the full, complex, and enduring human drama of the game. This is football in its entirety. Glory intertwined with consequence, spectacle interwoven with sacrifice, brilliance measured against risk. The NFL Darkside is not a cautionary tale alone. It is a reflective, analytical reckoning with a world where the stakes are immense, the pressures unrelenting, and the human cost profound. It asks us, as observers, to consider who benefits, who endures, and what it truly means to be part of a system that is at once breathtakingly extraordinary and morally complex. Here then is the final reflection: the story of money. Fame, rivalry, and consequence is inseparable from the story of the men who play the game. Their triumphs and failures, both on and off the field, illuminate the profound, often unseen, stakes of a sport that captivates the world. And in that reflection, we see not just football, but the enduring human struggle for identity, agency, and legacy in the face of extraordinary ambition and relentless scrutiny.